Ladies and gentlemen, this next song comes from Tanzania. It's a song in Swahili, a love song. It simply says, Malaika nakupenda malaika, which simply means, I love you, my angel. Malaika, nakupenda malaika. Malaika, nakupenda malaika. Ningekuoa madiwe, ningekuoa dada. Nashindwa na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika. Nashindwa na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika. Pesa zasumbua roho yangu, pesa zasumbua roho yangu. Nami nifanyeje kijana mwenzio, nashinda na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika. Nashinda na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika. Kidege hukuwaza kidege,
Omar, are you the one who's going to run it? But I'm starting at exactly 3 and it is 3. Okay. Ask them if they're giving me feed here. Am I getting any feed here?
Ningekuoa malaika. Malaika.
Hello, moderator. Our moderator.
She's getting ready, sir.
Thank you.
Food now now for a healthy tomorrow. It is a rather sizzling afternoon here in Kampala, Uganda. A very warm welcome in our midst. I would like to welcome Her Excellency Professor Amena Grip Fakim, who is the former president and the first female president of the Republic of Mauritius. Honorable ministers, distinguished speakers, and our listeners and viewers joining us online on Zoom and here live on NTV from different parts of the world. A very good afternoon once again, and welcome to the Pre-UN Food Systems Summit, well, a dialogue for selected advocates for Africa's development. My name is Sandra Twinobudio, a news anchor with NTV Uganda. I am also a show host of Eco Africa, a DW-inspired environmental program that airs all across Africa and Europe. I also have a particular interest in covering development and social issues such as environmental health and the impact of youth employment on a country's development. I am going to be your moderator for the next 3 hours. Now, as we speak, the world is currently dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And remember to choose your preferred language, maybe Kiswahili, French, English, name it. Now, big kudos to our translators for making it possible to reach different people this Thursday. Now, a brief background on today's event for those joining us. The Food Systems Dialogues were established in 2018 as an initiative of 5 partners. There's EAT, that is number 1, Food and Land Use Coalition, you can abbreviate it as FOLU, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, also abbreviated as GAIN, World Economic Forum, WEF, also World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Now, in this period, over 40 dialogues have been convened in 23 countries across 6 continents, engaging over 2,500 food systems practitioners. In 2019 alone, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres of the United Nations called for a food systems summit underpinned by an inclusive engagement process to unleash the power of food to deliver progress on all 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, in preparation for the summit, a diverse range of stakeholders from youth activists to the indigenous leaders, from smallholder farmers to the scientists and also CEOs are all invited to identify the most powerful ways to make food systems stronger and more equitable. Now, these classic versions of dialogues about food systems are a foundation and source of inspiration for the Food Systems Summit dialogues. Now, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the future of our planet and its people, we know that it does depend on well-functioning food systems everywhere. They should be sustainable, produce foodstuffs that are affordable, safe, and nourish people. They should do this in ways that restore ecosystems and ensure prosperity for all producers, processors, and also the distributors. Now, they should make the lowest possible contribution to climate change, something that we are currently battling with. Yet, most current food systems are not working properly for people, for the planet, and for a common future. So the dialogue today aims to answer the 2 fundamental questions. 1, how do we achieve sustainable food systems in Africa while ensuring natural resource and environmental health? Brilliant question. What must Africa do to feed itself and use its comparative advantage to feed itself and the world? Now, a few house rules for those that are for our speakers. You should make sure that your mic is muted when you're done speaking. And also to the audience, make sure to send in your questions in the Q&A section. You can send in that, and also on our social media platforms, NTV Uganda on Facebook and NTV Uganda on Twitter. I'll be right there to check them out. To our speakers again, you have strictly 10 minutes, and I will pick a few questions from the audience at the end because we do have an open discussion. But it is also important for our speakers to keep checking the questions too, so that if there's a critical question they feel it needs to be answered, they can answer it. Now, before I introduce and I invite our amazing speakers today, allow me invite Professor Adipala Ekwamu, who, by the way, is the chief organizer of today's event. He is the executive secretary of RUFORUM, a regional network of universities across Africa, to explain more about the United Nations Food Systems Summit and the purpose of today's dialogue, just in case you're also wondering why we're here today. He is one of the 100 individuals appointed by the United Nations Secretary General to mobilize global participation in the United Nations Food System Summit dialogue. Professor Adipala Ekwamo, a very good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, our moderator. I'm very honored with your introduction. Let me share my screen.
Prof, you are muted, please.
Let me share my screen.
Professor
Am I muted?
Ekwamo, we can't seem to get you. We would like to ask you to unmute your microphone so that we can hear from you. But as you do that, just to quickly take you, our viewers, through the program, we already had the welcome remarks from me, your moderator today, and we are just about to have the RUFORUM Executive Director, Secretary rather, Professor Adipala Ekwamo. He is once again the Executive Secretary, and right after that, it is very important to bring in some documentaries to give us a sense of why we are here today. And the documentary is going to be a message from the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy on the National United Nations Food System Summit 2021. Now, our very first session is going to start from the statements from the regional bodies. In this, we'll have the statement by the Executive Director for Agriculture Research in Africa, FARA. He's called Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo, and he already joined in. I'm told that our very first, our host today, actually, the chief organizer, Professor Adipala Ekwamo, is able to speak to us now. Over to you, Professor. We're excited to hear from you. You are the chief organizer of this event. Why are we here today?
No, thank you. It's a great honor to really host all of you. And it's a beautiful day in Kampala, Uganda, and I believe in the rest
Professor
of Africa.
Adipala
Can you hear me?
Ekwamo, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I
can hear you.
But can you hear me?
We're still waiting for Professor Adipala Ekwamo, who is the RUFORUM Executive Secretary, and he is the chief organizer of this event. We are just looking forward to hearing his thoughts and views and to help us understand why exactly are we here at the pre-UN Food Systems Dialogue for the selected advocates for Africa's development. We do have world leaders here today, and we do have ministers, former president, and we'll be looking at their thoughts of what they're doing in their different countries so that all of us can pick lessons from the different countries on how they're dealing with the issues to do with food systems. Are they good? You do remember food is very important, from the way we produce it to how we consume it, and of course, how we process it. So still hoping to get to Professor Adipala Ekwamo. It's very important to start with him to set the pace of this discussion.
Can you hear me now?
Madam
Can you hear me?
I think
Yes,
the problem
we
should
can
be
hear
with
you.
Professor
we can hear him.
Adipala Ekwamo, we are still waiting for you. Now, just to
No,
look
we can
at
hear
the
you.
Can
program
hear
once
you
again,
in Malawi.
we
You
will
can
start
hear
with
me?
the statements from
Yeah,
the
I
regional
hear you
bodies
very well in
mentioned
Senegal.
earlier.
Maybe the
We
moderator
have a
has
statement
checked.
by the Executive Director for Agriculture Research in Africa, that is FARA, and that is going to be led, we'll get to hear from the Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo. We'll later have the statement by the Director General, Arab Organization for Agriculture Development, that is Professor Ibrahim El Dukeri. And later, it will be followed by the statement by FAO Assistant Director General and the Regional Representative for Africa, Professor Abebe Haile Gabriel. So those are some of the people that we'll be having today. Now, we'll also get a statement from African University's representative, and this will be read to us by Professor Teresa Akenga, who's Eldoret, that is in Kenya. We're still, of course, waiting for Professor Adipala Ekwamo. Now, you know, when we talk about technology, sometimes it does get a bit tricky, but we are trying to sort that as much as possible. Hopefully, Professor Adipala Ekwamo can get to address us as quickly as possible. We are looking forward to hearing from you, Professor.
I am available. The rest are hearing me, but the moderator apparently is not hearing me.
But also you who's watching us on our social media, just to remind you, do go right away to Twitter pages, Facebook Twitter page, Facebook.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, let me keep going until our moderator joins us. Distinguished participants, our panelists, and indeed our moderator, today is a great honor to African universities that we have such a meeting of a diversity of actors. Allow me also to add my voice to welcome Her Excellency Professor Amina, the former president of Mauritius, not only a former president, a scientist, and a business lady. Welcome, Professor Amina. Monty Jones, thank you very much for honoring us, because today we also want to make accountability to the investment that you made towards the development of Africa. Our Honorable Minister from Benin, thank you very, very much for coming to share your perspective. Honorable Minister from Somalia, thank you very, very much for joining us. My dear friend and minister from Sudan, Assalamu alaikum. And from the warm heart of Africa in Malawi, thanks again for honoring us here. My brother Oga from Accra, Ghana, thank you for joining us. Professor Bebe, thank you very much for coming and for the work you are doing for Africa. Ibrahim from Sudan, Arab Agricultural Organization, thank you very much for joining us. Our two professors, Professor Teresa and Professor Toure from Senegal, thank you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give a brief walk, and I will try to keep it as short as possible. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, just a brief introduction as made by our moderator. RUFORUM, this is a network of 129 universities across Africa. It originally started in 5 countries of Eastern Southern Africa. Professor Monty Jones, in 2005, you asked RUFORUM to build capacity for agricultural research institution in Africa. You tasked us to build capacity for Sudan. You tasked us to build capacity for DRC. You tasked us to build capacity for Burundi. You tasked us to build capacity for Lesotho, Botswana in Southern Africa. The outcome of this is that there has been increased demand for the role of RUFORUM across the continent. So you set the seed that enable us to spread from the 5 countries to today, 38 countries. Thank you for that foresight. We are most grateful. In terms of what we do, ladies and gentlemen, RUFORUM has 4 main focus. 1, harnessing capacities that exist in various member universities and other institutions in Africa for strengthening agricultural development and food systems in Africa. In particular, we would like to build capacity for Africa within Africa, capacity development within Africa. Of recent, we have continued to face challenges of limited staff capacities in African institutions, particularly universities and research institutions. We have also continued to face low participation of women in our institution. Consequently, we are paying particular attention to strengthening the capacities in African universities and research institutions. The focus, the ultimate impact that we like to achieve is to strengthen productivity and resilience of smallholder farming communities. But to do this, we don't do it alone as universities. We must engage with other actors. Therefore, we place strong emphasis on strength, on fostering partnership, not just only for the agricultural sector, but also for building science, technology, and innovation capacity in the continent. Of course, the other role that we play is to support resource mobilization and advocacy for higher education in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, as our moderator mentioned, this dialogue is about issues that have been raised that the global community is engaging in. How do we strengthen the food systems across the globe? Why? Because we are still having rampant hunger and malnutrition in several countries, including in our continent. Our food systems are also facing new ravages, new challenges, declining natural resource base, and more recently and in a very, very devastating manner, the impact of climate change and variability, and of course, as mentioned more recently, COVID-19. But in whatever intervention we do to strengthen food systems, we must try to make sure that we promote inclusivity in the actions that we undertake, so that in the delivery, in the outcomes, we don't leave anybody behind. The focus of the UN food system is to try to galvanize efforts towards achieving zero hunger globally. The UN Secretary General, as has been mentioned, has set in a process of dialogue across the globe. He has appointed a global envoy that is catalyzing the dialogue, and it's none other than Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA, a former student, agricultural student, trained by African University. She is now championing this dialogue across the globe. It shows the significance of human capital development, that you produce the leaders that then go and champion and direct change. He has put in place what he called a group of a number of scientists that are guiding the dialogue. They have also identified 5 key areas for which actions is needed. That example includes trying to work towards zero hunger, promoting better food habits, sustainable natural resource, inclusivity, and developing resilience to the variabilities in our environment. As was mentioned by our moderator, he has also appointed a group of 100 champions to promote the dialogue globally, and Forum is privileged to be part of these 100 global champions. In terms of the dialogue, they've set up 3 main tracks. One, dialogue being carried out by the member states, such as what Benin has had, Sudan has had, Congo has had, dialogue facilitated by member states, largely the ministries of agriculture and other partners. He has also set up global dialogue platform for which we as African institutions, we need to engage. But also he has provided independent platform, such as the one that we're using today. This is part of the independent platform, which allows interest groups such as Forum to organize and engage in a dialogue with our various bodies. So for today, what is the expectation of our dialogue? One, we have brought in a number of distinguished experts here. We have a former president, a business lady, a scientist with us. We have our first World Food Prize winner, somebody who has mentored the Forum for Agricultural Research, setting the stage of development of the research systems here. We have our ministers who are championing development across the continent. You have people like Professor Ibrahim that are driving, coordinating agricultural development activities. Then we have our universities. Why do we need a university? How do you implement this thing? So we would like to hear from these various actors. What are the issues? What should we do, especially as a continent, but also at a global level? And also, what message do we take to the UN food systems? We'd like to hear from them. What are the recommendations? What actions do we need to strengthen food systems? In fact, the broad Africa's development agenda. What do we need to make sure we accelerate efforts towards Agenda 2063, but more specifically, strengthening food systems in the continent. We are also very keen to hear from our panelists, and indeed you participant, what key message should Africa be taking to the United Nations? So the rationale is to galvanize, to hear your own perspective on what we need to do as a continent, what would like to see the global community do and work with Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Back to our moderator.
Prof, they are still sorting out some technical issue in connectivity for her.
Okay, if that is the case, may we show the documentary? Dr. Ko?
Your Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, as you know, last year the UN Secretary General called for a food systems summit to unleash the power of food to drive progress across all 17 United Nations development goals. I thank you for stepping forward to become a leader for the food systems change. These dialogues bring together people from all parts of society to share evidence, experience, and new ideas. Food is powerful. The food we eat brings us together as families, as communities, and as nations. It underpins our culture, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world. The world's food system touches every aspect of human existence, which makes them valuable instruments of change. The reason we are having a summit this year, and the reason we're here today, is because we are off track. We are not set to achieve on our shared vision and goals for the 2030 agenda. Our food systems have staggering levels of inequality. Our key priority for this summit is to bring more inclusive, equitable, and healthier food systems while also safeguarding our planet. These dialogues are a core element of the summit process. They are an opportunity to come together and identify priorities and actions to be taken for a better future. This will be a people's summit, but it will also be a solution summit because everyone is part of the food system. We are looking to get all of you and your ideas around the table to ensure that action is owned and driven by different actors. We want action to be driven by you. Your leadership and ability to have courageous conversations rather than avoid them will be very critical. If we can't have courageous conversations about what needs to change and how we need to work together, then we won't be able to go very far. We need each of you to determine the food system you want for your future and to act on it to make them a reality. We must do this understanding fully well our place in the world and that what we do as individuals impacts on others. I look forward to working with you in this summit process. Together, we can build a world of inclusive growth, environmental sustainability, and social justice. We can build a resilient world where no one is hungry, no one is poor, and no one is left behind. I thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It looks like our moderator is still having problem. May I use this opportunity to invite Dr. Yemi Akimbamijo, the Executive Director of the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, to make his statement. Yemi.
Thank you very much, Professor Adipala. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are seated. I'm wondering if I will be allowed to share my screen.
Yes, please do so. Please do so, Dr. Yemi.
Okay, so. All right, I believe my screen is being shared now. Once again, thank you very much. I stand on existing protocol, and it's a great pleasure for me to be an honor to be able to participate in this very, very august occasion, and to also bring to you the very warm compliments of my board chair, Dr. Alioune Fall, and to all the high-level individuals on this program, and to all the invited guests. The subject is very, very apt for our consideration today, and I'm going to start by giving a few elements to the background, and that is starting from the fact that meeting SDG 2, keeping this continent and the globe at large hunger-free, is a huge task. After the SDGs were launched, 5 years down the line, Africa still remains largely off track, as revealed by the biennial review of the African Union Commission, which is a kind of an instrument that is being used to measure the response to the Malabo Declaration, and that keeps us on track as far as food and nutrition security is concerned on the continent. And when we look at the SDG targets, especially 2.1 and 2.2, which is around having safe, nutritious, and sufficient foods, and also to eradicate all forms of malnutrition, we come to a grim scenario that these two targets are in jeopardy. And on top of it, we also realize that on the continent today, there are two key issues of COVID pandemic and that of the desert locust that has created untold damage, on top of which we also have series of environmental and climate issues. We also recognize that these matters around food insecurity, poverty, malnutrition, they are a daily concern for all of us. And the implication is that it has led to high rise in undernutrition. It has come up from 19.1% in 2019, and now we are now having very high figures of undernutrition compared to what we had in 2014 when the SDG was just about to be launched. And we are now significantly off track on achieving the zero hunger target unless we really put into action very, very significant change and game-changing solutions for that matter. And on the continent today, we are at least 35%
life below water, very important also to take that. Aquatic, there is a dialogue that was actually still in this same food summit. The food we eat from the water bodies, we have land, life on land is very important to achieve a healthy place for the life on land. Peace and justice, and also strong institutions, and finally partnerships for the goals. Now, this is why today, in terms of the Food Systems Summit Dialogue, we are having different world leaders to pick their thoughts on what different countries, different institutions, education systems, what are they doing? How do they all fit within the same to actually achieve the entire goal of zero hunger? How do we look at the 17 goals and incorporate them in day-to-day life to see that we achieve all the things that we achieve? So yes, today we're having a very fantastic conversation on Food Systems Summit. We want to understand what are food systems, for example. When someone says food systems, what comes to your mind? Why is it important for us to be having that discussion this afternoon? Why is it important for Uganda, for Kenya, for Africa, for the world to be considering finding proper
Okay, I hope that I can continue.
Yes, please, yes, Dr. Yemi, please, you continue.
Thank you, Professor Adipala. So I just want to now zero in on some of the elements that I think deserve attention. And the first of that is that it is clear to us that we can hardly achieve the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 without transforming our agriculture. What does that mean? The continent today is at least 1 billion people serving some 3 billion meals on a daily basis. But the bulk of these meals are actually sourced from outside the continent, a continent that has over 60% as youth in its population, that has 65% of the arable land in the planet, and 80% of the fresh water on the continent, or 80% of the global freshwater on the continent. So when you look at these figures, it simply does not add up. We shouldn't be in a position where we are today, but to be able to change that narrative, we will need quite a bit of transformation. As I said before, we have about 75% of the population also depend on agriculture. Therefore, raising agricultural productivity would ultimately lead to the improvement of livelihoods of our populations. And therefore, we need to look at how research and science, for that matter, is being used, being deployed to raise productivity in a way that livelihoods are enriched. And this, I believe, is the core of the concern of Mr. Guterres, speaking to the food system that will really help Africa and the world at large to once and for all address in a holistic manner the whole gamut of our food production system, including the markets. And so we need to therefore now apply and promote science, technology, and innovation to be able to have the kind of transformation that will lead us to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 2, and ultimately containing food insecurity and malnutrition. The recent critical issues are about the yield gap that we have in both livestock and in the crops sector. We also have very, very staggering issues around soil degradation and soil fertility, issues of pests and diseases, declining resilience and negative effects of the climate change, and policies that tend to lower the economic incentives to invest in agriculture. Now, when you look at all of these complementing each other, the picture that is painted is actually very gloomy. So these issues have actually led to the food insecurity and malnutrition scenarios that the continent now finds itself. Now, over the past years, agricultural researchers have committed themselves to addressing these issues that are facing the food system on the continent. So we kind of find ourselves in what I describe as the poverty trap, with low crop yields, with food insecurity, and all the other elements that I stated earlier on, the biggest of which is the fact that we do not have enough incentive, we do not have the capital to invest in high quality inputs, and this comes back in a vicious cycle of which we need some measure of technology to be able to break out of this. Now, the way forward, as I must conclude now, is that we need to increase investment coming up from 3.3 average that we have of the GDP on an annual basis to what was recommended in Malabo some 20 years ago, that the heads of state and government committed to 10% of the annual GDP to be invested in agriculture. We need also to look at how we can promote policies that will ensure the economic incentives to raise level of investment and agricultural production, including modern inputs. We cannot afford to transform agriculture using hoes and cutlasses. We need to also increase investment in agricultural research. At the moment, I'm glad that Dr. Deepaola was speaking to the effort of RUFORUM in building human capital and infrastructure, and also to be able to raise the current level of contribution of just 1% of the agricultural GDP. That will be necessary for us to be able to improve agricultural science in the work that we do. It's also important that having launched the science agenda for agriculture in Africa, this still needs to be domesticated in most of our NAS. It provides the framework that can actually help us. It's going ahead, but we need to really fast track this and really put in quite a bit of stimulus to be able to ensure that we can deploy the power of science to be able to achieve our goals. And lastly, we need to strengthen the research extension farmer nexus so that we can enhance the adoption of the high technology in the farmers, with the farmers. This is about my last slide, and it's to talk about, before I speak to the recommendations, to build and strengthen solidarities and collective actions through the partnership and to mobilize and create innovation expertise. Secondly, we will love to co-create technologies and innovation with farmers and to address their challenges and enhance the capacity of farmers and consumers to contribute to research and innovation and also the policy formulation. Now, what messages are we looking at pushing to the Food System Summit? Now, lessons from the Ebola scenario across West and Central Africa have taught us that there are potentials for increased productivity and opportunities for agri-food transformation. So we must then do what we can to ensure that we are able to pursue a viable agricultural transformation to be able to improve livelihoods, because the livelihood of 70% or more of Africans still depend on that. The COVID-19 has delivered severe shocks to the food system, frozen a lot of things, and movements have been curtailed, livelihoods have been jeopardized, and so on. The impact of demand and supply are actually leaving some 132 million undernourished. And then this is the time for us to be able to help these people, to build them out of the cul-de-sac where they are in because of the impact of this disease. The science agenda, as I mentioned before, represents an urgent and realizable opportunity for our continent to be able to realize the agricultural potential. And Africa's economic model should be promoted to ensure that market-based or market-oriented approaches for agricultural products are given. To the African Union government and the Commission, we would like to say that we are not short of funds on the continent because we pay about 50 billion for food imports. But the political will does not seem to be strong enough, because if we will invest in the system that supports the national food system, we can become much more resilient and much more self-sufficient. The market-oriented system will be a very important approach to rescue and promote and strengthen our systems, the food systems. And lastly, the policy environment should assure that activities and services in the food systems are geared towards zero hunger. We should make agriculture attractive to the youth. There are so many youth in Nigeria, for example. You have the National Youth Service Corps. Why don't we have them focusing on agriculture and empowering these youth and making agriculture really attractive? We need to have good foresight systems to guide transdisciplinary approaches in solving the complex challenges. And lastly, we need to strengthen the capacities of the producers themselves and the SMEs, which is very key to generate effective demand for science, technology, and innovation. On this note, I yield back to the moderator. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Yemi. I do not know whether our moderator is back, but really thank you. Let me ask one.
Yes, it's there.
But let me ask Yemi one. What would be your one single message to the United Nations that we should take as Africans to the United Nations Summit? One single message.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a very good opportunity. My single message is to strengthen Africa's capacity to deploy science. I've always said that agriculture is not rocket science, but without science, and we are still the most deficient continent when it comes to science and agriculture.
It's off. We have lost you also.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was not.
Could you repeat? I think it's important. Repeat what we are saying.
Thank you. Thank you. What I was saying is that the one key thing that I can say to the Food System Summit is that we do need a high dose of agricultural science in our production system. Africa remains the most science deficit production system in the world. There's no question about that. And as I always say, that it does not take rocket science to transform agriculture. But
we would like to dive into another conversation from Professor Ibrahim El Dukeri, who's the Director General, Arab Organization for Agriculture Development. Just a brief introduction about him. He is the Director General of the Arab Organization for Agriculture Development. I will repeat that for emphasis. Prior to that, he was the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Forestry in Sudan, and also the Director General of the Agriculture Research Corporation in Sudan, as well as the Professor of Agriculture Economics with over 20 years experience in policy analysis. Very key to help us understand what the Arab Organization for Agriculture Development does. And a very good afternoon, Professor. Welcome to the Pre-UN Food Systems Summit. First things first. Tell us more about the Arab Organization for Agriculture Development for our viewers to understand better what you do and why it is important for us to tap into what you have done. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I'm privileged to be present in this important gathering. Let me get directly to the question that you posed. Hello. Well, let me start by saying some few words about the Arab Organization for Agriculture Development, which is a sub-regional organization under the League of Arab States, mandated to contribute to agricultural development and food security of the Arab region. And in the language and the jargon of today, this mandate means to contribute to transforming food systems of the Arab region, which is looking into the actors' interactions along the value chain from input supply to production of crops, livestock, fisheries, and other agricultural commodities to support to processing to marketing and preparation of food consumption and actually the disposal of the end products. So this is what AORC, this is what AOAD is all about. It is the sub-regional organization with the headquarters here in Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan, with 4 regional offices, one in Algeria, one in Cairo, one in Amman, and one in Kuwait. And we are having partnerships and close relation and ties with regional and sub-regional organizations as well as international entities. Thank you. Madam Moderator. Hello.
Professor Dukeri, our moderator, Sandra. Professor Dukeri, perhaps you could make a comment.
Well, in fact, let me just go back to the statement that I prepared, which captured some of these things. And if there are specific questions, I will definitely respond to those ones. And let me start by saying that Excellencies and Ministers, and here recognize the presence of Professor Intisar from Sudan and Dr. Said from Somalia, as well as our President, Professor Amina, the business and scientists as well. And I go on to dignitaries and top government officials, development actors and activists, academia, civil society organization, the media, colleagues here present. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be present here in this important event and to address the event on behalf of the Arab Organization for Agricultural Development, which is a specialized agency in agricultural affairs under the League of Arab States, which, as I said, is headquarters in Khartoum and 4 regional offices. Our mandate is to support sustainable agricultural development and food security in the Arab region with the help of our national systems and regional and sub-regional organizations. With this mandate and in the course of attaining the objective, which is adjusting and transforming food and agricultural systems of the globe, has emerged as a jargon of the day. And that's why we are here today, to deliberate on the issue and to contribute to the possible responses to the UN Secretary General request, who called for a summit in September of this year to define what it takes to clarify the roadmap for putting in place conceptual and operational modality for efficient and resilient food and agricultural systems of the globe. Our region has engaged seriously and held various events of dialogues and has identified critical issues and pathways to adjust and support our food systems and agricultural systems as well. And among those issues is ensuring preservation and sustainable management of natural resource base, especially land and water, and also ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. Our region has both chronic food insecurity as well as obesity, and then shifting to sustainable consumption patterns that will not place pressure on the resource base, and finally boosting the production, agricultural production, to meet the demand of our region. There is a lot that needs to be done to advance these stated objectives, and it requires an informed resource and technical partnerships among key development actors along the research to development continuum, with the private sector taking a significant role. I strongly believe that policy dialogue and capacity building are critical in the course of adjusting food and agricultural systems. And my institution, which is AOAD, in partnership with you all, will spare no effort to walk the long walk to realize our common objective of sustainable food systems. Dear colleagues, I am humbled to the effort exerted to have this event taking place this morning by all of you, and especially Reform Secretariat led by Professor Adipala and the CREDIAS team. Let me affirm that AOAD is here to contribute to the best of its ability under my leadership to work closely with you to ensure agricultural development of our region and to transform the food and agricultural systems as planned by our collective effort. Thank you all, and God bless you. And I'm sure there are certain issues and themes that if I get back or the moderator gets back to us, I will be ready to respond to her questions and clarifications needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I still do definitely want to pick some of your thoughts on how Africa, from your lessons, how Africa can, some of the recommendations that you have for Africa in order to strengthen its food systems. Just to really give us a few tips, if I would put it that way, what are some from the successes that you've had? How can Africa actually strengthen its food systems? I believe you have interacted with some African leaders and the challenges that we face.
Well, what it requires for the Africa to strengthen its food systems, I would definitely say the mainstreaming strategies and frameworks aiming at transforming food systems from development actors and national systems. Also, orientation of policy dialogues to underpin and inform and guide our engagement towards well-planned transformation. What is also required is massive and well-packaged human and institutional capacity, and institutional capacity engagement, serious private sector engagement, as well as advancing public-private relationships, and finally, orientation and focusing more and more on the drivers and game changers. And I'm picking up 3 of those. One of those is namely the value chain development, entrepreneurship development, and digital transformation, especially for youth and women in our region and in the African context. Thank you. Do you hear me, Madam Moderator? Hello? She's talking now.
Do we hear each other?
No, we're not hearing the moderator.
Ensuring preservation and sustainable management of the natural resource base, and also ensuring access to safe and nutrition food for all, shifting to sustainable consumption partners, and boosting nature positive production at sufficient scale, and finally advancing equitable livelihood and value distribution. The thoughts of Professor Ibrahim El Dukeri, joining us all the way from joining us. And he is the Director General of the Arab Organization for Agricultural Development. You're still watching us here live on NTV and also on our social media platforms. We definitely do apologize for a few technical issues here, but diving into our next speaker, we do have Professor Abebe Haile Gabriel, who is the Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Africa. He has more than 30 years of experience in strategic leadership and management in complex environments at national, sub-regional, and regional levels, focused on agriculture and rural development in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, he holds a master's and doctorate degrees in agriculture and rural development from the International Institute of Social Studies in the Netherlands, and a Bachelor of Science or degree in agriculture economics from the university in Ethiopia. Professor Abebe Haile, a very good afternoon. Very excited to have you on the panel today. And we are looking forward to picking your thoughts on what exactly you're doing and the role of the Food and Agriculture Organization. We want to understand what role is it actually playing towards the organization of the Global Food Systems Summit and for the support to Africa. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished participants, all protocols observed. The Professor Adipala Ikwamu, the Forum Executive Secretary. Greetings to you all. Let me start by congratulating Professor Adipala for hosting this important pre-UN Food System Summit dialogue, and thank him for inviting FAO to make a statement. I would like to start by stating the obvious, that the food system that Africa aspires to build is not essentially different from what the rest of the world wants to achieve. The food system that Africa aspires to build must be that delivers food security and nutrition for all. It should be a system that sustains the livelihoods of the diverse agri-food system actors along the agri-food value chains. It should also be a system that does not compromise the economic, social, and environmental basis needed to ensure the food security and nutrition of future generations. When we assess the current status of the agri-food systems in Africa against this framework, we find that there are legitimate concerns that significant gaps remain, with huge consequences for achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, on eradication of poverty and hunger, but many more. First, Africa's agri-food systems are defined by vulnerability to multiple and overlapping shocks. So a notable feature of Africa's food systems is the issue of having to deal with these multiple and overlapping shocks and threats. Colleagues who have spoken before me alluded to some of them, such as the climate-related shocks, the transboundary pests and diseases, example, the desert locust in Eastern Africa, the fall armyworm, the conflicts. I don't think enough attention has been paid to the conflicts that ravage livelihoods, many countries in Africa, the economic downturns and the slowdowns, among others. For example, before COVID-19 pandemic, there were 250 million hungry people in Africa in 2019. The prevalence of undernourishment actually have increased from 21.2% in 2015 to 22% in 2019. The COVID-19 pandemic has further compounded the problem, for sure. There has been increased level of food insecurity in 2020. COVID-19 may have added between 23 to 39 million people to the ranks of the undernourished in 2020 in sub-Saharan Africa. And among the most impacted include the agri-food, small and medium enterprises through decreased sales, difficulty accessing raw materials and inputs, reduced availability of workers, among others. The vulnerable groups, including women, the rural youth, smallholder farmers, pastoralists, artisanal fisherfolk, migrants, seasonal workers, and internally displaced persons. So the impact of reduced incomes on food security and nutrition is huge. Healthy diets have become out of reach for 3/4 of Africans because simply they are not affordable. Over half of all Africans, and that is 51%, cannot afford a nutrient adequate diet. And globally, there are about 185.5 million people who cannot afford an energy sufficient diet. The vast majority, 80% of these live in Africa. What's more worrisome is the fact that adequate mechanisms to effectively manage the impacts of those shocks and threats are either weak or non-existent. For example, African governments, with very few exceptions, could not provide for stimulus packages or protection systems similar to what the developed countries have done, mainly because of fiscal constraints. There are concerns that most African economies will not be able to provide post-pandemic recovery options. These capacities have been further dwindled because of public health emergency considerations due to COVID-19 pandemic. Recovery is therefore likely going to be slow and uncertain because the crisis is still unfolding. Second, the agri-food system in Africa features a lot of inefficiencies caused by structural deficits. My friend, Dr. Yemi has alluded to a lot of this. A definitive feature of agri-food systems in Africa is the resource use inefficiencies. The source of agriculture growth in Africa has largely been through expansion of the cultivated area at the expense of forests, grasslands, and other uses, rather than from increased productivity. A recent study by FAO on land use changes between 2000 and 2018 indicates that about 12 million hectares of forests were cleared and converted to cropland. Water use efficiency has been the lowest compared to other regions, showing only marginal improvements over time. Irrigated agriculture is still in single-digit percentage points, about 7% on average. Failure of rains in just one season could have devastating impacts and could wipe out whatever little progress may have been achieved. These practices are not sustainable. In addition, there are significant leakages along the agri-food value chains. Post-harvest losses in Africa are estimated to be about 14%, and this is one of the largest against a backdrop of low production levels overall. The task of food processing usually falls disproportionately on women. In many African countries, women spend on average 4 hours per day pounding grain. This is huge dependence. There is huge dependence on food imports in several countries. weak intersectoral linkages, market and institutional failures. For example, low farm gate prices running parallel to high urban food prices within relatively short geographical distance. This is one of the things which we have observed in COVID situation. The good news is that there is a way out of these undesirable situations. And this is through transformation to a more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable agri-food systems, which provides a lasting solution. FAO encapsulates strategic actions around 4 interrelated betters, namely better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life for all. In Africa, where smallholder agriculture is predominant, agriculture is not only the source of food, but also the source of incomes and livelihoods. Better access to productive resources, to information, technology, infrastructure, markets is therefore key. Naturally, most of these solutions reside not just within the ministries of agriculture per se, but in several other sectors, in trade, industry, health, infrastructure, energy, environment, and of course, education, science and technology, and finance, among others. Hence, multi-sectoral engagement and coordination remains to be key. A relevant question to ask would be whether public policies and practices have not systematically neglected agriculture and the rural sector in Africa. In other words, is the agriculture sector a policy priority? Available figures on allocation of public investment in agriculture indicates that it has been low, but also declining over time. For example, the Agriculture Orientation Index for government expenditure fell from 0.64 in 2001 to 0.15 in 2018, Africa-wide. Now, let's compare this with the commitment to allocate at least 10% of the national budgets to agriculture in the context of the CAADP. We need to recognize the fact that the agri-food systems involve several actors and stakeholders, not just farmers and the government. Hence, multi-stakeholders engagement is absolutely necessary. This is also an aspect of the inclusive process. In terms of policy, governance, and investment, we may need to focus on the following, at least. First, address issues related to access to resources and opportunities to rural producers and the disadvantaged social groups such as women, the youth, among others. Second, address the infrastructural deficits in its both soft and hard aspects, digital agriculture, but also roads, storage, processing, transportation, logistics, skills, and so on. 3, address the issue of incentives to invest by relevant actors across agri-food value chains. And this is about bringing value to the farmers, to rural producers, to consumers, investors, and so on, such as factoring in consumers as significant stakeholders for healthy and nutritious diets, for example. 4, address structural vulnerabilities through well-designed and implemented mechanisms to strengthen resilience. And 5, effective multi-sectoral approaches and engagement of partnerships and multi-stakeholders. There are emerging regional and global opportunities to support transformation. On the demand side, the fact that each year Africa imports food worth tens of billions of dollars is a good indicator of the size of Africa's food markets. With the African Continental Free Trade Area entering into force, the African food markets are growing. On the supply side, the potentials for increased productivity and opportunities for agri-food transformations are huge. For example, according to some estimates, Africa could be 2 to 3 times more productive. Advances in technology and innovation are providing immense options in generating knowledge and providing solutions to increase productivity. New digital technologies are driving the agri-food transformation process at a faster pace that has never been experienced before, shifting how agriculture value chains are organized, providing new opportunities for more and better jobs, entrepreneurship, and innovations to address the binding constraints in agri-food systems. The development of post-production segments of food value chains, including processing and logistics, could particularly have a big impact on productivity, on competitiveness, and job creation. the youth can take advantage of such opportunities to support the process as well as to benefit from it. I would like to conclude by outlining some imperatives towards making this happen. First is about getting the narratives right. This is the need to debunk some of the inherited narratives that agriculture is not economically attractive business and that the youth is not interested in agriculture. Agriculture is not just about a tedious farming. It can be modernized. It can be made more productive and more economically rewarding. Second, exploring into what is emerging and the need to seize it as an opportunity. Example, digital innovations, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the nature positive solutions in the context of Food System Summit, in which Africa can have comparative advantages and make a significant contribution. Third, bridging the missing middle between the global scale options that are available, and this applies to technology, knowledge, science, and the local and national level capacities that are weak, and the key role of institutions such as universities and research institutions to promote science, innovation, technology, and knowledge sharing and application. And last but not least, the need to have effective multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholders dialogue and engagement. FAO has been actively engaged in the preparatory process towards the Food System Summit across the whole spectrum, within the scientific group, working with the champions, supporting the dialogues at national as well as sub-regional and regional levels. And we look to further deepening this engagement. I thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Abebe Haile Gabriel, who's the FAO Assistant Director General and the regional representative. You've been very critical to touch on the aspect of we need to debunk the false narratives when it gets to agriculture, that the young people cannot actually find agriculture rewarding. And this is why some of them are not taking part in it. But this is a narrative that we definitely do want to debunk. There you can definitely send in your thoughts on his submissions, but thank you so much for being very deliberate in highlighting the current situation with respect to agricultural development and the food systems in Africa. And you've been also very deliberate in pointing out some of the critical issues to be considered and the actions needed to strengthen the food systems in Africa, and how, of course, how do we make our agriculture sector more competitive by getting more young people involved and making it more attractive, because we have seen with the COVID-19 pandemic that most communities have actually turned to agriculture. The agriculture sector, it has been the sector in some countries that has been left to operate among the essentials. I mean, how do we see that different people do actually take part into that? We also saw that you said it is important to focus to let governments focus on making it easy for people to access resources, and also address the infrastructure deficit that does affect the food chains, food systems, and also address the issue of incentives, the structural vulnerability. Thank you so much, Professor Abebe Haile Gabriel. If there are any questions in the chat, we'll definitely dive into them and we'll send them to the speakers. You're still watching the pre-UN Summit, Food System Summit, and we're coming to you live here in our NTV studios at the Serena Conference Center, and also live on our social media platforms. Do remember, you can choose the language that you need. Kudos to our translators that are making it possible for us to speak to different and reach to different people that are joining us today. This is a very important conversation because all of us really can be affected if food is not processed properly, produced properly, and also consumed the right way. Ladies and gentlemen, do allow me to pick the thoughts of Professor Teresa Akenga, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Eldoret in Kenya. Prior to joining the University of Eldoret, she served in different academic and administrative capacities in Kenya and Rwanda. She has a wide experience in training, research, leadership, and management. As a leader, she is a member of the different regulatory professional professional bodies, which comprise of the Forum Board Executive Committee, the Forum for Women Vice Chancellors in Africa, and the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World. A very good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure you've heard the submissions of the speakers today. We just would like to pick your thoughts on how you think different institutions can play a key role in seeing that the food systems in Africa work for the different African countries. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that I bring you greetings from the African universities, and in particular from the Board of Trustees of the Regional Universities Forum for Capacity Building in Agriculture. Spread out in 38 African countries, and it was founded in the year 2004. The vision of Forum is to be a vibrant, transformative universities, catalyzing new sustainable, inclusive agricultural development to feed and create prosperity for Africa. We have listened closely to the key messages from the three panelists who have spoken before me. We thank them for their recommendations and proposals for needed actions. Your Excellencies, we the African universities have consulted amongst ourselves, our partners and our leaders, and have come up with one voice. Allow me to briefly highlight the message of the African universities to this dignified gathering and to the Food Systems Summit in 2021. Number one, as African universities, we are deeply humbled by your commitment and contribution to Africa's development in the various current and past portfolios. We are also humbled by your commitment to Africa's agricultural and rural development, to the meeting of regional, continental, and global developmental targets, and to the United Nations Food Systems Summit 2020. Your presence in this historical gathering is clear evidence of this fact. Number two, as the African Vice Chancellors of the Forum Network, we are committed to supporting the African Union Commission, sub-regional organizations, and African national governments in identifying and implementing continental game changers that can transform agri-food systems for the benefit of our countries and people. In this endeavor, we commit to working together with national, regional, international partners from the public and the private sector and civil society to improve the quality of higher education, research, and innovation, to building capability and facilitating equitable access to knowledge and skills. In so doing, we seek to ensure that no one is left behind on the continent. To this end, the third point, the actions to support the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit process to achieve successful outcomes, we specifically propose efforts towards A, mobilizing resources for continental initiatives that support human capital development that increase Africa's capability in research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. B, mobilizing resources for strengthening research in the continent to generate technologies and innovations for enhanced productivity, value addition, and improved nutrition, post-harvest management, and responding to emerging challenges such as climate change and environmental degradation. C, ensuring that the results of investments in university education, training, research, innovation, and outreach programs in particular the highly skilled alumni and technologies generated are integrated and used to stimulate local and continental-wide economic recovery and socio-economic development. Ruforum universities will adopt a holistic, multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach to ensure that indigenous knowledge and modern science and technologies are integrated into university teaching, research and innovation agenda to take advantage of opportunities of youth, to see the value and prospects in agriculture to overcome the challenges in African food systems. We reaffirm that African universities' investment will be used to support faculty and students working on priority food systems transformation actions in partnerships with smallholders, SMEs, and disadvantaged communities, women, youth, and refugees, thereby giving early exposure for our youth to agribusiness and building trust in universities as being integral to Africa's social and economic progress. To this end, successful past and ongoing initiatives, including scholarships and graduate training and graduate research grant programs, making agriculture fit for purpose, will provide the foundation for the selected game changers that Ruforum has identified, consistent with the 5 tracks for the 2021 United Nations Food System Summit. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, Ruforum Vice Chancellors urge this dignified gathering to advocate to the United Nations Food System Summit to endorse our efforts for securing long-term and focused investments from governments and development partners to support African universities to deliver high-quality tertiary education, research, innovation, and outreach programs for realizing our collective agenda for food systems transformation in Africa. We call upon our leaders and all of us and our partners to promote and integrate inclusivity in our development, especially access to education, to ensure, as I said earlier on, no one is left behind. We call about African Union Commission to engage African universities in initiatives, including EU-AU partnerships for sustainable agricultural development, food and nutrition security, and in climate responsive initiatives. We call upon African Union Commission again and the committee of 10 African heads of state and governments championing education, science, technology, and innovation development in Africa to create a higher education fund for Africa, in brackets HEFA, for strengthening staff capacities and increasing the pool of African women scientists in African universities. I hereby submit, and I thank you all for listening to me. Hello, did you hear me?
The rate in Kenya, very critical thoughts that you brought out, that it is key to mobilize resources for continental initiatives that support human capital development, that increase Africa's capability in research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. You also mentioned that it is key for us to mobilize resources for strengthening research in the continent to generate technologies and innovations for enhanced productivity, value addition, and improved nutrition, post-harvest management, and also responding to emerging challenges such as climate change and environmental degradation. And of course, ensuring that the results of investment in university education, training, research, innovation, and outreach programs, especially are given for the highly skilled field alumni and technologies generated and are integrated and used to stimulate local and continental-wide economic recovery and socio-economic development. Thank you so much, Professor Teresa Akinga, for joining us this afternoon. Now, looking at some of your questions, I would like to ask the speakers to go through the Q&A comment section, just in case you see a question that has been directed to you, so that when you open the discussion to the audience, you can definitely chip in and give us more of your thoughts or your response to the question that has been given to us. Now, the professor did point out that it is key for us to mobilize resources for training and research in order to achieve productivity, value addition, and the like. And speaking of that, we'll be having a short documentary on training food systems change makers. This is a story from the Kenyan University in Kenya. We'll be having that documentary in a bit, but also just to lead you on the program that we are having, we'll later have perspectives from selected government representatives. We'll be having a statement from the Minister of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries, all the way from Benin, that is Honorable Gaston Kosi Dosui. And we'll also have the statement from the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation from Somalia, Honorable Said Hussein Eid, and also a statement from the Minister of Education, the government of Malawi, Honorable Agnes Mapanda. We'll be seeing a short documentary in a bit, but you should know that this conversation, in case there's a question that you'd like to understand, are you in the processing industry, production industry, but even you as a consumer, what is that one critical issue that does affect you and you feel it needs to be addressed, and to get some more clarity on that? You can go to our social media on NTV Uganda. You can send us your questions, or if you're joining us on Zoom, you can send us your questions in the Q&A, and we'll be right there to pick this segment, the question, and directing it to the speaker. It's very key if you can mention the speaker you would like to respond to that question. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take you in for a short documentary on training food systems change makers. This is a story from Kenyatta University in Kenya.
From Nairobi, Kenya, Roo Forum grantee and plant scientist Dr. Maina Mwangi is traveling through central eastern Kenya to visit a very special banana farm.
With us today, we have one of the students who was supported by this project. This is Jerry, seated next to me.
My name is Njeri Njau, and I'm at Kenyatta University. And I'm all passionate about agriculture, all passionate about food security. That is my cup of tea.
Safari yetu I think jambo.
Yeah.
Jambo sana.
My names are Elias Kasingo. I am a father of 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 boy. I'm a farmer of banana. Before I was a coffee farmer. Yeah, before the bananas were introduced to me.
I have always wanted to interact with farmers. Sometimes I used to think maybe it's just lab and more lab, but this was awesome.
I have the students. This is the student now. They come with the measurements and taught us how to prepare.
The challenge the farmers were facing was, first of all, obtaining healthy planting materials, seedlings.
Farmers could not afford suitable seedlings, and so they borrowed them from neighbors. Unfortunately, this meant that they were also borrowing soil-borne pathogens.
This is the banana variety they were growing before. It's called a Gros Michel. Has big bunches, nice fruits, but it is very highly susceptible to these soil-borne pathogens. And one solution was to bring in varieties that are not affected. We wanted to come to this community and establish nurseries. You know, identify farmers who can host a nursery. A cluster of other farmers would learn from there.
Elias is the chairman of a local banana farmers cooperative with 2,000 members, many of whom have been trained to boost productivity.
Production is high. That's why I am saying we need some variation and we need the export market.
Each enormous bunch of bananas on this farm weighs over 100 kilograms and will sell near an astounding $30 each.
I think the potential for this family is great. And especially for the young people right now, we find that young people do not want to go into farming. But I'm sure right now, young people around this village will want to go into farming because they have seen the kind of potential it has.
In my home, now I have the children, they want to run. Now that's where the money goes. I'm very secure. If I think of something, I can do it.
I'll tell you frankly, I had great hope that the project would succeed, but I had no imagination that it would have this impact, empowering communities. And I believe we are doing that very well because of the well-crafted program that RUFORUM is supporting.
RUFORUM, big thank you. You are making food security happen in Africa, making us the innovators we really are to make Africa the food basket it is. I won't sit back and hope for change, that I will be the change that I want to see.
Be the change that you would want to see in the world today. Very interesting documentary from Kenyatta University in Kenya. Well, this was about the training food systems change makers that you've had. Proper food systems should be able to create an impact and make Africa the food basket that it actually is. That was a short documentary coming to us and giving guys a brief, understanding of why it is important to, as young people, you could see there were actually young people in this training that were trying the best also to contribute to the food systems in Africa and the world at large. Africa, in fact, it can be the food basket. So how about we find ways to work towards achieving that? Now, we do want to get perspectives from selected government representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Next on a program, we have Honorable Gaston Kosi Dosui, who is the Minister of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries in Benin. Under his leadership, the ministry increased the country's GDP by at least 5% from 2015 to 2020, despite the COVID-19 pandemic that has ravaged the entire world, a crisis that has not been seen before. Recently named Best Minister of Agriculture, we are eager and really looking forward to pick his thoughts. He is a strong advocate for agriculture development as key to solve youth and economic issues, and aims to make Benin the bread basket, once again, bread basket of the West African country by 2025. He is also an agriculture engineer and a doctor of veterinary medicine. During his career, he has been Minister of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries under both the former and current Benin government in 2006 and 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me welcome Honorable Gaston Kosi Dosui. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And just to quickly
Madame la modératrice.
Perhaps the Honorable Minister could proceed and talk. Honorable Minister, you can talk.
Madame la modératrice, merci pour la présentation.
Thank you very much.
Professeur Adipala, et à travers vous, tous les recteurs, tous les directeurs des universités partenaires, du forum, distingués panélistes, c'est un honneur, un plaisir de participer à ce dialogue. C'est d'ailleurs même une fierté parce que vous avez bien voulu cibler quelques-uns parmi nous aux affaires aujourd'hui pour apporter une compréhension au développement de la science et de l'agriculture en Afrique. Je vous en remercie. Dans votre mot introductif, les prouesses apparentes dont vous avez parlé, c'est bien sous l'éclairage net de mon président, le chef de l'État, président Patrice Talon, que tout le monde connaît très bien dans le secteur agricole avant qu'il ne vienne aux affaires. vous voulez vraiment que nous parlons un peu du système alimentaire en Afrique. Et à mon sens, je pense qu'il est bon de savoir comment est-ce que on va assurer la sécurité alimentaire, la nutrition de nos populations sans compromettre l'environnement dans lequel nous travaillons. Et quelle pourra être demain la contribution de l'Afrique, d'abord à pouvoir couvrir ses besoins alimentaires et à nourrir le monde. Il faut reconnaître aujourd'hui en termes environnementaux, le continent le plus sain encore reste l'Afrique. Mais qu'on le veuille ou non, où en sommes-nous aujourd'hui dans la caractérisation des systèmes alimentaires? Pour être simple, deux systèmes cohabitent. Le système alimentaire commercial et le système alimentaire de subsistance. Le système alimentaire commercial est caractérisé par des chaînes d'approvisionnement formelles qui desservent en partie les marchés urbains, périurbains, avec des réserves alimentaires existantes dans certains pays. Ce système repose sur des exploitations de grande taille, peu nombreuses, mais essentiellement orientées vers les cultures commerciales. Il est fortement soutenu par le développement technologique et un mécanisme formel de financement. Ce mécanisme dépend en partie de l'extérieur. En l'occurrence, l'Occident pour son approvisionnement en produits vivriers. Le système alimentaire commercial permet aujourd'hui de répondre aux enjeux de sécurité alimentaire de la sous-région de par la diversité et la quantité de produits qu'il mobilise et met à la porte des habitants. Il s'agit par exemple de produits tels que le riz, le lait, la viande, le poisson, le blé, l'huile, et j'en oublie. Le système alimentaire de subsistance est largement dominé, et puis qui est d'abord largement dominant plutôt, concerne certains produits alimentaires de base qui rentrent dans nos régimes alimentaires comme le maïs, le mil, le sorgho, les racines et tubercules, avec des chaînes d'approvisionnement moins formelles et moins organisées, bien que vitales pour les populations rurales. Ces populations en dépendent presque à 100%. Avec une prédominance des exploitations familiales de petite taille et orientées vers une polyculture, ce système répond également aux enjeux de sécurité alimentaire en termes de disponibilité, mais permet aussi de contribuer à de meilleurs résultats nutritionnels à travers l'utilisation. Il s'agit par exemple des produits forestiers non ligneux, les légumes, les fruits traditionnels, les produits de l'élevage et de la pêche, qui sont captés frais et utilisés directement. Ce système est très fragile du fait de sa forte dépendance des aléas climatiques, avec pour une forte résilience dans l'espace et dans le temps. Les mécanismes de financement et d'accompagnement technologique de ces chaînes de valeur restent encore suffisamment faibles. Le problème émergent du dialogue au Bénin. Le dialogue national a été organisé en début de ce mois avec des acteurs de la recherche scientifique et technique et de l'innovation en agriculture. Et différents autres dialogues nationaux spécifiques ont été également organisés dans la même période que ces 2 dernières années. Les problèmes émergents relevés à divers niveaux se résument ainsi qu'il suit. Dans un premier temps, l'environnement du consommateur. Nous notons ici une exposition des populations à des choix alimentaires limités par le faible pouvoir d'achat, avec aussi une offre déficiente en qualité et en quantité, augmentant ainsi les risques de maladies nutritionnelles et chroniques. Je dois vous dire que cette tendance est aggravée durant ces dernières années par les perturbations enregistrées par les régimes pluviométriques, les dégâts liés au mode d'élevage transhumant, les restrictions imposées par le cadre de gestion de la pandémie de coronavirus et la crise sécuritaire au Sahel et au Nigeria. Les importations des pays déficitaires en produits vivriers exercent de fortes pressions sur les stocks vivriers des pays excédentaires, induisant ainsi une flambée soutenue du prix des denrées alimentaires, laissant planer la menace sur la faim et la paix sociale. Le triple fardeau nutritionnel, sous-alimentation, suralimentation et carence micronutritionnelle est prévalent dans presque tous les pays de la sous-région. Le deuxième problème émergent, c'est les chaînes d'approvisionnement. Ils sont marqués par deux faiblesses essentielles. La part importante des importations des stocks disponibles du fait de l'insuffisance de la production des denrées de base, des fruits et légumes pour couvrir les besoins de consommation. La faiblesse des systèmes de distribution qui se résume par la faible capacité de gestion des stocks et de transformation agroalimentaire entraîne des taux élevés de perte et de gaspillage alimentaire. Le troisième problème que nous relevons, c'est l'environnement alimentaire, qui est caractérisé par un faible développement des marchés de produits de bonne qualité, nutritionnels et sanitaires, de faibles taux d'échanges commerciaux, la faiblesse des mécanismes de coordination entre acteurs des systèmes alimentaires centraux et décentralisés. Je dirais enfin, il y a le principal moteur d'influence des systèmes alimentaires. On n'y peut rien, c'est l'explosion démographique et l'urbanisation galopante, la gestion de la fertilité de nos sols et des ressources en eau, l'assainissement, l'irrigation, la variabilité et les changements climatiques, les crises politiques et sanitaires, pour ne parler que de ça. Spécifiquement, la situation actuelle de la recherche pour le développement agricole relève le défaut de financement durable de la recherche scientifique et de l'innovation en agriculture. Et c'est pour cela que je pense, vous le dites bien, il va falloir de volonté politique très forte pour remédier à cette question, car on ne saura développer l'agriculture sans la science et la technologie. Nous avons aussi noté une faible employabilité des diplômés dans les métiers de l'agriculture du fait que la formation universitaire ne répond pas toujours efficacement aux problèmes de développement de l'agriculture. Nous devons revoir les curricula de formation. Nous devons nous adresser plutôt aux métiers plutôt que de former des cadres qui comprennent un peu les questions agricoles, mais sans pouvoir mettre la main à la pâte. Troisième élément important, c'est que les programmes de recherche universitaire faiblement arrimés et peu intégrés dans les politiques de développement pour un grand nombre de recherches effectuées sans impact lié sur le développement agricole. Je suis heureux de constater que les universités de nos jours ont changé quand même un peu l'approche pédagogique pour intégrer les politiques de développement au niveau des pays et asseoir les programmes sur les besoins réels de ces politiques. Quelles actions à entreprendre en tant que continent pour renforcer nos systèmes alimentaires? D'abord et avant tout, je pense à une agriculture intelligente face au climat et sensible à la nutrition. Il s'agit entre autres d'accroître l'attention sur l'économie locale à travers les ressources alimentaires, la culture locale et leur valeur ajoutée dans les systèmes agroalimentaires. Et promouvoir une approche centrée sur les agriculteurs pour une meilleure adoption des innovations. de développer des partenariats entre divers acteurs à travers des plateformes multi-acteurs pour une action synergique soutenue par les sciences participatives pour faciliter la diffusion de la technologie. La deuxième grande chose que nous devons faire, c'est de soutenir l'entrepreneuriat agricole, notamment l'entrepreneuriat de jeunes. Les jeunes et les femmes demeurent la main-d'œuvre essentielle à même de révolutionner l'agriculture. Les jeunes, en tant qu'innovateurs de nouveaux modèles et outils, des actions fortes en direction de cette cible consistera à les intéresser à la science et la technologie de l'agriculture à travers la recherche pour générer des informations pertinentes pour les agriculteurs et les impliquer dans la formation pour fournir, proposer des solutions d'agriculteurs. Aujourd'hui, nous avons promu des startups. Nous avons promu des startups dans l'agribusiness qui font leur fierté. Et ils ont même pu monter des clusters qui arrivent à diffuser l'innovation et à agréger la production des petits agriculteurs. Dans ce troisième temps, il faut pouvoir accroître durablement l'investissement dans la science, les technologies et innovations pour rendre les systèmes résilients et les régimes alimentaires sains et durables. Je comprends, chers universitaires, que les universités doivent jouer leur rôle pour la sécurité alimentaire et la contribution à l'atteinte des ODD. Cela implique la nécessité de promouvoir des mécanismes d'autofinancement et de financement qui soutiennent la recherche durable. Je voulais vous dire tout simplement que j'ai aimé le dialogue que nous menons ici sur cette plateforme et je pense que les scientifiques peuvent beaucoup influencer les politiques de développement de nos pays qui ont le devoir de nourrir nos populations. Je vous remercie.
Research is one of the key issues that constantly we've had our speakers today address the importance of providing enough sustainable funding to encourage research among all the different partners and stakeholders in different agricultural processes. You also mentioned that, I mean, he was very critical and very intentional on giving the current status of food systems in Benin and broader West Africa, and also bring forward the critical interventions that need to be put in place to address the emerging issues to strengthen food systems in Benin and West Africa broadly. But also it's from his submission, it's been clear that it is important to develop climate smart agriculture and also focus on local economy, not forgetting to create a farmer-centered approach, and most importantly, develop partnerships for proper food systems in Africa at large. Thank you so much, Honorable Gaston Kosi, for joining us this afternoon here on NTV and live on our social media platforms and also on Zoom, and bringing forward your own perspective of what exactly is happening in Benin. Like any other African country, there are a few issues here, and you also mentioned that we should be trying to narrow the gap of food import. Of we produce our food, why should we be importing food? A very key issue. And you also pointed out the issue of providing support in terms of entrepreneurship to the young people and also women. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Honorable Gaston Kosi, for joining us. And I believe that different people that could have questions will drop these questions in the Q&A comment section, and our panelists can always keep checking. If a question has been directed to you, you can pick it up, and later when we open the discussion, you can actually answer to that. Once again, to the next speakers, do remember you have about 10 minutes, so let us try to respect time. Now, moving on to our next speaker this afternoon, we'll be picking the thoughts of Honorable Said Hussein Eid, who is the Somali Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. He previously served as the Somali Minister of Health. Prior to that, he served as the chairman of the Plantland Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. the questions that we would like to understand is basically to pick his thoughts on some of the issues that have been talked about by other speakers before him, and also what are the current issues underlying the food systems in Somalia, and would like to pick some tips from him, for instance, on how the country is responding to some of the challenges that have been presented by different issues, for say, you could say COVID-19, climate change, global warming, and the like, and also what actions should we take as a continent. Over to you, Honorable Said Hussein. A very good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, moderator. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum, RU Forum, Dialogue for Food Systems, honorable ministries, honorable chairman, honorable head of universities, expertise. I'm very pleased to be here with you today at this virtual meeting convened and organized by the esteemed institution of RU Forum. I'm also very humbled by the presence of these brilliant African leaders, scientists, intellectuals, with their undeniable contribution to the continent's agricultural sector. I'm especially very pleased to have with me this panel, Professor Abebe, Assistant Director General of FAO, and also Professor Ibrahim Dukhairi, Head of the Arab League Agricultural Organization, and other eminent personalities present here. Their presence has been really felt, and their message, recommendations, insights has been well taken too. Let me thank RU Forum officers again for hosting this important meeting. I really appreciate and congratulate with their tremendous work and incredible endeavor to scale up the food systems. We can survive only in togetherness to face this unprecedented extreme climate and other multiple shocks like drought, COVID-19 prevailing in the world today. And also, especially in East African region, we are suffering also the desert locust invasion in many areas of Africa, of East Africa. We hope to see such cooperation will grow to form solid partnership, which is capable to meet the huge challenges in place in every corner of the continent. In this regard, we have no longer a business as usual as an option. We must come up with new initiatives and effectiveness, homemade mechanisms and solutions in order to transform our agricultural food systems to ensure that no one lacks regular access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, while our production and consumption patterns brings no harm to the environment. As it is being said in the Somali National Dialogue on Food Systems a couple of days ago, which Professor Adibala and other officials from RU Forum were part of it, the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation of Somalia has developed many policies, laws, procedures, and regulations, particularly in the past 4 years. And surely we will look back to those policies in place to examine its contribution on food systems, especially the seed systems development regulations. As a matter of fact, Somalia, for the last 2.5 decades of civil unrest, there was a very weak regulatory framework to regulate and manage the seed systems. That has contributed to the reduction of our production, the preservation of our varieties, seed varieties. So now with the enactment of these new regulations, we hope that our seed system will develop. As a post-conflict state, which is undergoing a state-building process, Somalia is now well positioned to revitalize institutional capacities and agricultural infrastructure, to surge national productivity, and also to promote linkage to the market trade, locally and externally. With this platform given us by Rome Forum, it's really a rare opportunity to reset, rethink, and redouble our efforts to build forward a better food systems using coordinated approaches that are inclusive, holistic, and coherent regionally and internationally. Somalia will get best out of this opportunity to look at different African experiments to get in a better position to self-estimation. The responsibility of African universities to take the mental and agricultural, engage with others, and have their voices heard in sharing solutions to challenges in African agriculture. They should take the challenge and engage in a very coordinated efforts to enhance Africa's extension activities, research, and extension services, so that Africa can have its own solutions for their own food systems problems. As the saying goes, African solutions for African problems. Even though there is a contest that African problems are neither African problems, so that solutions cannot be purely African solutions. So we need Africa to take its own steps to feed its population. And Africa is endowed with all resources, natural resources, to have enough food for its people. What we are lacking is scientific research, extension, capacity building for our farmers, and development of real-time mechanization process for our agricultural activities. This Rome Forum platform, as we all are aware, is an advancement, or is paving the way for the UN Summit, which aims to generate actions and identify solutions by issuing a call for action at all levels of the food system. It's our hope to raise awareness and elevate public discussion about reforming food systems to help realize the Sustainable Development Goals by implementing various reforms for the good of the people of the planet in general and in Africa especially. Meetings such as meeting of this kind of the one we have today are therefore very timely, as they foster cooperation and engagement among brotherly nations of Africa. I thank you very much. These are my brief remarks. Thank you very much, Chair and other eminent personalities. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Said Hussein Eid, the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, all the way from Somalia. You did mention something that did catch my attention, the fact that you said that Africa should find solutions for its own problems, a statement that has been consistently talked about of African countries should find their African solutions to African problems. But you also did point out the fact that it is very important for us to come up with new new initiatives and coordinated force to enhance Africa's activities to once again solve Africa's problems with Africa's solutions. Very interesting conversation. Thank you so much. If you have any questions for him, his submission, you can send them in to our social media platforms or go all the way to the Q&A. If you're joining us from if you're joining us from live here, or if you're joining us on Zoom or even on Facebook, but also our Twitter platform is there. You can use our social media, Twitter page and Facebook to send us your thoughts, and we'll be right there to pick your thoughts. You're still with us, and you're still watching the Pre-UN Food Summit 2021. We're excited to have a panel of speakers. Next on our program, we have Honorable Agnes Makonda Nyalonje, who's the Minister of Education, Government of Malawi. The key aspect to pick from here is to see how education, how Malawi, for instance, is really, what strategies is it putting in place to see that it strengthens its food systems, and how is Malawi preparing for the global food systems. Over to you, Honorable Agnes Makonda. We're glad and delighted to hear from you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and through you, let me also thank RUFORUM for including me in this distinguished panel discussion, and allow me, in the interest of time, to say all protocols are duly observed. As you have indicated, Moderator, I'm going to look at 4 areas very briefly. Number 1, I'll look at the role of education in helping to achieve more sustainable and inclusive food systems. Number 2, I'll share what Malawi is doing to strengthen its own education chain in order for it to be the producer of resources or human resources that can uplift Africa's agriculture. Number 3, I'll look at what Malawi is doing to strengthen its food systems. And I'll end very briefly by looking at what we're doing in Malawi to prepare for the Global UN Food System Summit. Education is key to human capital development, particularly in science, technology, and innovation, which are indispensable in achieving more sustainable and inclusive food systems. Human capital development, or human capital in particular, is like the conductor of an orchestra, directing how other resources should be put into productive use to attain desired outcomes, including sustainable and inclusive food systems. Before we can create a new kind of Africa through the African Union Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, on ending hunger, we must create a new kind of citizenry, one that is capable of innovating, envisioning, and building a tomorrow that is better than today. And when it comes to creating that better tomorrow, there's nothing better than education in making sure that we develop the necessary human capital. And it is for this reason that I would urge that both Malawi and other African countries must invest heavily in education, because it is imperative that African governments do so, and do so heavily, in order to achieve all the development aspirations, including the Agenda 2063 and SDGs. The following are some of the roles that education can play and does play in regard to achieving sustainable, inclusive food systems. Number 1, training and developing experts in a wide range of areas that can facilitate knowledge transfer and learning to farmers, traders, processors, businesses, while ensuring that youths and women are not left behind in the capacity building equation. Number 2, education can also help to build skills in all aspects of the food system, from production all the way to processing, retail, and household utilization of the rich food biodiversity that countries have, including Malawi. Number 3, education can help in conducting research and adapting and developing technologies that optimize production, processing, and utilization of food species while safeguarding the environment and the biodiversity. Malawi, in our case, needs high-value products that are made from food materials that are produced in the country using state-of-the-art environmentally friendly technologies. We need to mechanize our agriculture and adopt smart and precision agriculture techniques that benefit from the new digital technologies. We need to move beyond the handheld hoe, and education is the route to doing that. Number 4, universities in Malawi are already involved in outreach programs such as incubation hubs for nurturing innovative ideas in food systems and agriculture, and these need to be further developed and expanded, which is why I would call for investment. The second area I want to take us through is what we're doing specifically to strengthen the education value chain in Malawi. Malawi is making strides in strengthening education value chain. My ministry is implementing reforms in a number of areas, including promoting evidence-informed policy and decision-making, and emphasizing good governance. In particular, we have done or are doing a number of initiatives and developments, including the following. My ministry has introduced 2 new directorates, namely the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation, and the Directorate of Open, Distance and E-Learning. These directorates are critical to enabling my ministry to produce the kind of skills, the kind of human capital that the agriculture sector, among others, need in order to achieve the inclusive and sustainable food systems. There's a number of other areas that we're working on. For example, we're seeking to obtain international support that can facilitate the development of innovative academic programs. For example, the development of a PhD in food systems at Luana, that is one of our universities, and World Bank financing to help extend the provision of training in fisheries science through African Center of Excellence, ACE program, and also this is also situated at Luana. We're also facilitating student access to scholarships and loans to pursue STEM programs, including agriculture-related courses. Additionally, we're supporting postgraduate research in agriculture that would lead to commercialization and industrialization in line with the Malawi Development Agenda, our Malawi 2063. We're also introducing vocational schools, for example, TVET and community technical colleges, some of which are also offering agriculture-related programs. Additionally, we are adopting policies on inclusive selection of students to include those coming from marginalized communities in the periphery of society. And in this category, we have major focus on making sure that women make it into university programs. Moreover, as some of you may have heard, our president, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Makathi Chakwera, was on 1st June 2021, not too long ago, recognized as champion of higher education in Africa for his commitment to higher education and for his work in promoting food security through investment in the agriculture sector. This year, Malawi has achieved the highest yields in maize production that the country has known so far. The third area I want to go through is what Malawi is doing to strengthen its food systems. Strengthening food systems in Malawi is the role of the Ministry of Agriculture. However, I will do my best to represent them as an educationist and not as an agriculturalist. The food system in Malawi is mainly defined by activities in the agricultural sector, that is crops, livestock, and fisheries products. With changing times, the food system in Malawi is and growing need for ready access to foods that take less time to prepare and with improved storage properties, especially in urban and peri-urban areas, food systems also depend on imports of processed food. Despite having different food agricultural products that respond to the recommended 6 food groups in the food basket, our national conversations on food systems have clearly shown that dependence on maize, low dietary diversity, lack of food safety standards, and poor marketing have worsened during the COVID pandemic, among other factors. In response, Malawi is doing the following. Number 1, implementing the Affordable Input Program, which I've just pointed out, that has managed to get us to harvest the largest maize crop the country has ever achieved. Number 2, aligning our food goals to the Malawi 2063 development agenda. In fact, our vision to become a middle-income, upper middle-income country by, or rather middle-income country by 2063 is powered by 3 main goals, one of which is improving agricultural productivity and commercialization. Number 3, we're strengthening structured markets for food crops and animal products to ensure that producers get value for their produce while consumers get value for their money. Number 4, the country is also investing in transport networks and market infrastructure to facilitate easy movement of agricultural produce in the country and to minimize post-harvest losses. Malawi is also promoting value addition of agricultural produce. And additionally, we're also promoting dietary diversity to ensure that people are not dependent on selected items and disregarding abundance of food, sort of food resources that the country has. Currently, farmers are encouraged to grow bananas, low input and high output, and drought-tolerant cultivars. Malawi is also putting in place policies that favor efficiency and effectiveness in the food systems with regards to land tenure, marketing, seed, to name but some. And finally, we're also implementing social protection programs, commonly known as Mtukulapa Komo, those programs that aim to uplift the household. Finally, I would like to share what Malawi is doing in preparation for the UN Food Summit. Malawi is engaging all stakeholders, including farmers, non-state actors, academia, private sector, development partners, and the different government ministries, agencies, and departments to self-reflect on how we can improve our food systems so that it can provide healthy and sustainable food for generations to come. On this point, let me add, as Minister of Education, I'm particularly interested and I'm particularly keen to support developments in agriculture, because for me to produce the results that I'm expected to produce for the country in education, I need well-nourished learners. And currently, that is not the case. So going on, I would like to also point out that in particular, Malawi is currently conducting the food system dialogues to establish a national position on food systems, the latest being one convened on the 19th of May, 2021. Regional and district dialogues are also taking place across the country, and more are planned for the months of June, the rest of June, and then July. The different stakeholders involved in the dialogues represent the different components of our food system. Preliminary outcomes of the dialogues show that Malawi is interested in promoting diversification, production, and consumption of indigenous foods, promoting infrastructure development, and strengthening coordination and policy coherence. Above all, and coming from the education sector, here is my key message. I believe that Africa must invest in quality education systems that place science, technology, and innovation at the core. Africa must invest in the conductor of development, or in the conductor of the development orchestra, which enables all of the aspirations for development that Africa has, to be realized, because it's my firm belief that unless we have the engineers, unless we have all the different skills that will power agriculture and achieve inclusive and sustainable food systems, we cannot achieve any development. And all of it is only possible through effective education, human capital development. I thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Honorable Nyayonje, who is the Malawi Minister of Education and a former Member of Parliament, for giving us the key role that education can play when it gets to food systems. You did mention that education can play this huge role in regards to achieving a sustainable and inclusive food system if it is possible to train and develop experts in a wide range of areas that can facilitate knowledge transfer and learning to the farmers. Skills development, of course, has also come up again, conducting research and adapting and developing technology that can optimize production. Thank you all. Thank you all that are joining us on our social media platforms and even here on Zoom and also on NTV. We'll now move on to our next speaker, Honorable Ntisa Sagairon, who is the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research. We do ask for the next speakers that we try to stick to the 10 minutes rule so that we catch up with time and allow the rest of the program to carry on. Now, I do want to move on to her to basically pick her thoughts. We know that she comes from a huge country with diverse ecosystems. How are they ensuring that the diverse food systems actually are incorporated in ensuring that they're proper and do serve the interests of the citizens? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will put off the video for just to keep the power. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah.
We will be picking the thoughts of Honorable Professor Ntisa, who is the South Sudan Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research. She is a professor of archaeology at the Department of Archaeology, Faculty of Arts, and she has special interest in theoretical archaeology, Islamic civilization, and museum studies. We hope we can actually pick her thoughts and basically pick some lessons on how we can ensure we get proper food systems. We do ask you to unmute your microphone so that we can hear you. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you can hear me, and we are looking forward to pick your submissions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Just to dive into some of the other questions that we would like to hear how the Sudan Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research, how they're currently putting in, what strategies they're putting in place to see proper food systems and the current status of food systems in Sudan. I mean, what are some of the issues, the opportunities that they see, even with the different issues that come up, for instance, COVID-19 again, climate change, global warming, how are they addressing those issues? How are they identifying the opportunities in there? And how is research organized to respond to some of the environment challenges and other associated challenges? Honorable, can you hear me? We are looking forward to picking your thoughts today.
Yes, sure, I'm hearing you. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Unmute your microphone, please.
Yes. Do you hear me? You don't hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. All right, all right. Okay, I will just put the video, okay, just for the sake of the power, all right? Off, I'll put the video off.
Honorable, can you hear us today?
Yes, yes, I'm hearing you. Yeah, thank you very much.
In Sudan, and
okay, thank you much.
And the challenges and opportunities that have been
presented.
No,
I'm here, please.
Taking advantage of them.
Yes, please. Can I start now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay, honorable friends, guests, good afternoon. Now, I will just go straight forward to the food system in the country, although it is a very complicated topic. And you cannot talk about all of it because it have a lot of activities, production, for example, processing, transport, consumption, and of course it requires many steps, and it has a variety of inputs and outputs. But I will just give you a few words about what do we have in Sudan. We have the agriculture and livestock raising as the main sources of livelihood for most of the Sudanese population. It's about 1/3 of our inhabitants here in Sudan dependent on farming and animal husbandry for their livelihood. And we are having here 4 subsectors in Sudanese agriculture. We have the mechanized rain-fed crop production. We have the modern, of course, irrigated farming. We have the traditional fed farming, and we have the livestock raising. And for the animals, the fodders come from crop residues on irrigated and rain-fed farms and from vegetation along the rivers and canals. Now, the Sudan main crops, just a few words about Sudan main crops. We are having cotton, of course, peanuts, sesame, gum arabic, and sorghum, and sugar cane. And the subsistence crops includes also sorghum and millet and wheat and corn and barley. This is beside, of course, wheat. This is beside wheat. Now, overall, the grain production of sorghum and millet and wheat is insufficient for rising domestic demand, even with a good harvest in recent years. But this, of course, requires from Sudan to depend upon imports, especially imports of wheat. About 2.6 million tons of millet is the export of the Sudan, produced by Sudan in 2018, and this makes the Sudan the 3rd largest producers in the world. And of course, we produce sugar. But this is beside, of course, other vegetables and fruits like onions, banana, mango, tomato, potato, and all this stuff. And for the animals, we are having, of course, the sheep and the goat and the camels and the pigs as well, and poultry. And of course, for the goat and for the camel and for the sheep, we depend on them for meat and for milk as an important source, of course, of protein. Now, I just would like to move to what threats we are having. And here I would like to concentrate on the effect of policies and how it can affect the lands. For example, there was a research done in Kordofan, and the findings of that research shows that the cultivated areas in Kordofan under cash crops are increased over the time compared to food crops. This is very serious because this is mainly resulted from some policy transformation and the structure change that seek to expand the area under cash crops. And of course, food security is influenced by low productivity and unclear marketing price policies for agricultural products, as well as inequality and lack of income. This is one example. Another example is the mechanized rain-fed farming, which began in the fertile clay plains of eastern Sudan in the mid of 1940s and has since greatly expanded. One of the major disadvantages of this type of agriculture is that the rich farmer, this is the problem, that the rich farmers practice what I can call it a sophisticated version of traditional shifting cultivation. They farm an area intensively with government finance equipment for some years or few years, and then they move to a more attractive virgin land when yields decline. This practice, of course, has led to soil erosion and even to desertifications in some areas. A third example I would like to give is the expansion of mechanized rain-fed agriculture in the region used by the Baggara, those who are herding cows. Continued government efforts to enlarge the cultivated area and pressure on the land from the growing population gradually reduced the grazing area. At the same time, traditional cultural forces brought about a steady increase in cattle numbers. And what is the result of that? The result of that was a growing overstock and pasture depletion until the outbreak of the civil war in 1983, which was followed, of course, by the devastating droughts of 1980s and early 1990s. And all this led to reducing livestock numbers throughout Sudan. Now, despite these problems, the broad belt of mechanized farms in the east, which is stretched from the Adbara River west to the Blue Nile, is now the granary of the country, in which we have sorghum, sesame, and cereal grains as the main crops. Two programs, again, this is one of the good things, that there were two programs implemented to alleviate the food insecurity problems, namely the school feeding program and food for work. Also, adopting the improved technologies through strong and powerful research institutions and extension services will enhance the farming system and food security as well throughout the community colleges. And I would come back again to the community colleges. Now, do we have researches? Yes, we have. We have a lot of research that has been carried. And this shows that it is not a problem of carrying researches at all. Like, for example, I'll show some researches that to enhance quality and production, which has been tried, improving the sweet corn plant to enable the poor to reduce liquid sugar that contains sucrose, glucose, and fructose, a high sweetness ratio, which makes consumption less, and it is useful also in sweets and jam factories. And the stems are used in the production of bioethanol, which is used in fuel industry. That is one. Another example is improving maize high productivity and pest resistant hybrid. The proportion of oils and sugars were raised to produce ethanol again. Another example is the development of varieties of rain wheat suitable for hot environments. We know that we cultivate wheat during winter, and improving maize high productivity. No, this is I mentioned, and also improving sorghum and producing a Sudanese hybrid that was previously imported from India, from South Africa, and Australia. And we use it for porridge, and we use it for what we call it kisra. It is a type of thin bread. We have it here. Also, there is another research development of varieties with high productivity and good quality of Egyptian beans that are resistant to climatic change and diseases. Now the productivity has increased by 80% after treating a sort of parasite weeds called haluk, which has distracted farmers from growing Egyptian beans for a long time. And more, of course, also concerning cowpea and more so, and concerning millet varieties with high productivity, quality, and early maturity, which is adapted to different production environment. But there are also some drought-tolerant varieties. These are all examples of how there are a lot of researches. There are some researches that is used to help to stop the parasites. Yes. Improving cowpea crop with high productivity and higher protein in content, which is useful for reclamation of limestone. And utilizing roasted soybean flour with high nutritional value. This is how we are trying to address the nutrition issue, to combat malnutrition diseases by producing low-cost products. Production of gluten-free bread from soy flour for patients with wheat allergy. And there are a lot and many of these examples. Now, yes, Sudan has a great agricultural potential. I just would like to tell you a small information that in 1944-45, when the government, that is the British government, put a project to cultivate the cracking clays of Central Sudan in the area of Al-Gadarif. The prime purpose was to meet the food needs of army units.
I would like to let you know
yes.
that one to conclude.
Yeah. Yeah. So they have cultivated all these areas to do what? To meet the needs of the army units stationed in the British colonies in East Africa. We are having about 35 of these universities, and we are having community colleges. What is important, just to end my talk, is that what we need is to integrate our efforts and to cooperate. We are always calling for networking, but hardly realized. We need to support the scientific research to eradicate the parasites that affect the amount of the yield. It is a problem now, as I told you, it is not the problem of research, it's a problem of decision makers. We need them to look at what we have produced, what we are doing, how they can make use of it. And the most important thing above all is to develop community colleges. These are very important for the transfer of knowledge, for transfer of technology, in local scale, of course. And of course, we have to look at the faculties of agriculture, why the students enrolled there are the ones who are having low score. Thank you very much. Yes, I finished.
Thank you.
I do not hear her.
Our moderator, we are not hearing you. Moderator.
We cannot hear you. Yeah.
Moderator, can you? Okay. Amitu, and can we intervene? Can we go straight to the documentary? We are not hearing her.
Yes, we can go to the documentary. Yes, please.
Please.
Yeah.
Amit Otol, can we go to documentary? Amitu Oto, can we go to the documentary?
In a group with the former president of Mauritius, we would like to pick her thoughts on how the private sector can play a key role in actually achieving proper food systems in Africa, on this continent as well. Ladies and gentlemen, would like to take you in for a short documentary about the Africa that we want. You don't know that all these discussions moving forward, discussing ways to see that we create the Africa we want, the Africa that we are proud of, but most importantly, the Africa that we also contribute to make it better, bigger, and better. Let's take a look at that short documentary and we'll be back.
What is behind the idea of the statement, the Africa we want? Is that all of us, every single one of us, has a role in building the Africa we want.
What is the Africa that I want?
Wow, the Africa I want. I want to have an Africa where there will be less hunger. There will be equal opportunity.
My Africa is one which is confident.
An Africa that is able to create jobs for its young people.
I want an Africa that is self-sufficient to feed its population.
Is a prosperous Africa, a disease-free Africa, a malnutrition-free Africa.
You need to be secure. People need to be well fed. People need to have places to express themselves and not to feel afraid. People need to dream of possibilities and realize them.
The Africa I want is an Africa which will be prosperous, which will be diverse, and which will serve as the food basket, not only for ourselves in the continent, but also to the world.
The Africa that is able to derive the bulk of its income from agriculture, in the sense of having raw materials that are produced by the African farmers.
The Africa that we see that we can use science to solve most of the problems.
I would like also to make sure that women are also not left behind in Africa.
And that there will be less boundaries physically and virtually.
Hunger-free, prosperous, powerful, exporting.
Where we believe in ourselves, where we see the value of the resources that we have.
Is the Africa that is resilient and has the structures, institutions, and processes to renew itself.
People feel strongly that we should own our destiny.
We can be an amazing example to the rest of the world.
That is the kind of Africa I want to see.
And I would like Africans to say, oh, it's great to be an African. The opportunities are there. It's now up to me. It's up to me.
How exciting would it be to live in that Africa? And so you get motivated into putting your shoulder to the wheel and building the Africa you want in whatever corner you may be.
The Africa we want, creating one that is very sustainable, one we can be proud of. Ladies and gentlemen, let us quickly get the perspectives from the selected advocates for Africa's development. We'll right away delve into a conversation with Professor Monty Jones, who's the former Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Food Security, Sierra Leone, and first Africa's World Food Prize winner. He was also the special advisor to the president and ambassador, and he will be speaking to us on exactly what is happening. But he worked as a breeder at the National Rice Research Station before joining as a coordinator of the USAID Cameroon Rice Program. Ladies and gentlemen, allow us welcome Professor Monty Jones. Over to you. A very warm welcome to the show today. Would like to pick your thoughts. We know that your outstanding efforts are seen all across Africa, and you being the first World Food Prize winner. What does that mean, for instance, for people watching us today? And also, what is your perspective on the current food system issues in Africa? I would like to hear that, and your message to the Global Food Systems Summit, and finally, your message to the African governments. Would like to request you to keep it at exactly 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Your Excellencies.
Over to you, Professor.
Participants, they know the.
She said it.
Mm-hmm.
She said it.
Well, Professor, we hope we can hear you. You just have to unmute your microphone.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Professor Adipala and his team for selecting me to participate in this very important meeting. I also would like to express my appreciation for giving me the opportunity to say a few words on my perspective for promoting food systems for Africa's development. I will define food systems simply as all the processes that will ensure availability and affordability of food to feed a nation. For example, growing crops or raising livestock, harvesting, value addition or processing, packaging, transportation, marketing, and consumption. I will concentrate this presentation on the agricultural aspects that will cover all of these processes. Agriculture, well, let me, first of all, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, walk you through the African agricultural context. Agriculture is the largest sector of the economy in Africa, contributing about 35% of the GDP and employing about 60% of the labor force. Hence, agricultural continued growth is essential for Africa's development. Production systems are very diverse and dynamic, and over 40% of the world's uncultivated arable land is in Africa. I believe that one day we will see Africa produce enough food to feed the world. In most places, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, the landscape is a topo sequence stretching from the upland through the hydromorphic to the lowlands. Potential for increased agricultural production and productivity is high in Africa, with generally high rainfall, rivers, adequate solar energy force. But for many decades, African agricultural production and productivity are low and have remained stagnant or declining until in recent years. But Africa still lags behind the rest of the world due to the following reasons. One, Africa's agriculture is predominantly subsistence farming. Agriculture is predominantly small scale, as over 65% of Africa's population relies on subsistence farming with little or no use of external inputs or improved inputs. Inadequate uptake of new agricultural technologies. Inadequate public and private sector investment in agriculture. Majority of countries invest less than 10% of national budget on agriculture. For 4 decades between 1960s and 1990s, African agriculture was characterized by low, stagnated, and declining agricultural productivity. During that period, Africa lost on its share of the world trade from 3.5% to 1.5%, an equivalent loss of $70 billion annually. Our economic growth improved slightly for about a decade from the year 2000 or so, and GDP was sustained at high level of 5.4% on average due to good governance, reduced civil conflicts, better microeconomic policies, and increase in prices of commodities. Since then, economic growth has been slow until 2021, when an increase of 3.5% GDP growth was recorded. However, there is still limited access to regional and international markets, so that Africa still imports $44 billion worth of agricultural products, exports only $25 billion worth of agricultural products, which results to a net deficit or net import of $19 billion per year. A major persistent problem is the weak policy and poor institutional environment. The second reason why Africa is lagging behind the rest of the world is the need for Africa to develop better policy environments. Efforts should be made to promote and facilitate policy analysis and institutional environments necessary to boost productivity, promote market access, create wealth, and improve livelihoods. African institutions should always gain access to evidence-based policy information for informed decision-making and improved broad-based inter and intra-regional market performance. African institutions such as the African Union, CAADP, AGRA, and FARA should dialogue with the national governments to commit to creating such favorable policy environment for sustainable agricultural food systems and rural development aimed at developing strategic decision-making options for policy, institutions, and markets. The third point is to promote agribusiness, which I believe is the driver of economic growth and development. Agribusiness added value to the value chain is low at 38%, and Africa needs to close the gap with food production farming. For example, of 63 billion of intra and extra African trade in the year 2017, only $12 billion was classed as processed good. Africa should reduce to the minimum export of unprocessed agricultural and other products. Africa should shift emphasis from primary commodity production to value addition. As much as Africa has 60% of arable land, it has 90% of raw mineral reserves. Reserves gold, diamond, coltan, bauxite, rutile, iron ore, oil, gas, and other minerals of economic interest to the world. Africa should use this as bargaining power to add value here in Africa. I am insisting to add value here in Africa to these products and sell to interested parties at profitable level. Funds from these mineral sales can be channeled to further develop agriculture and other sectors of the economy to boost overall growth and development. The fourth area is capacity building. Africa should develop capacity to promote its objective to attain food and nutrition security and play an active role in the regional and international marketing and trade. Therefore, with lead from the AU, CAADP, RUFORUM, AGRA, and FARA, Africa should promote its capacity to coordinate and share information on food systems and agricultural development, advocate to national government the need to conserve natural resources, protect the environment, reduce and address the causes of climate change, stimulate development, and disseminate new technologies in the fields of natural resource management, genetic resource management, biotechnology, policies, and market development. RUFORUM, taking the lead, and AGRA and FARA are to work together to identify important and not too commonly thought of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to capacity building and Africa's food and nutrition security and marketing of its product. RUFORUM, AGRA, and FARA should then provide innovative, high-impact ways of addressing these issues through scientific cooperation under the following headings: taking advantage of the strengths, strengthening the weaknesses, seizing the opportunities, and dealing with the threats. Ladies and gentlemen, my key message is therefore for Africa to promote value chain approaches and ensure development of agribusiness and agro-industry as the key lever to transformation of African economies and subsequently to development. Africa should pursue increased productivity alongside competitiveness and strengthen the position of men and female farmers along the value chain and their working and living conditions. Achievement of Africa's aspiration for ending poverty and hunger and achieving sustainable development is drawn to long-term vision, political will, policy environment, leadership, and human capacity. African governments should set up national food security, manufacturing, marketing, coordinating committee, probably selected by the team should be selected by the president, but they should have the clout to meet with and brief the presidents regularly to seek their advice and approval. The coordinating committee should advocate and bring together as necessary policymakers, politicians, ministry officials, the private sector, and other key stakeholders, including renowned scientists, researchers, and master farmers to plan the national program. African governments should also establish a dedicated technical team to support the coordinating committee to manage processes such as gathering feedback from the non-state actors, aligning projects to strategy, and capturing learning. Africa should solicit assistance from the international community and the United Nations development partners, philanthropists, friendly governments, foundations, and companies. We would request that they support the new official African vision on food systems. Government should foster public and private investment to the agricultural sector to improve productivity, strengthen value and distribution chains, and enhance access to local, regional, and global markets. Any proposed funding will provide Africa a solid base for which to identify additional sources of funding and build on the achievements to date. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I submit and thank you all for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your submission, Professor Monty Patrick Jones. I mean, you did point out the issues that affect Africa, considering that Africa's agriculture is predominantly subsistence farming, and that it is very key, very important, very critical for us to develop better policy environment and also to work towards promoting agribusiness, the drive of economic growth and development, not forgetting the importance of building capacity in the general population, and also really promoting value chain approaches and ensure development of agribusiness and agro-industry as the key lever to transformation of African economies and subsequently to development. Thank you so much, Professor Monty Patrick Jones, Africa's first World Food Prize winner and also former Sierra Leone Minister of Agriculture. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please do allow me to carry on to our next speaker. And as we are almost coming to the end of today's session, but please allow me carry on to the next speaker. We'll be speaking to Her Excellency Professor Amina Grip, who was the 6th president and first female president of the Republic of Mauritius. She has been the managing director of the Center International Day Development, and she was awarded the Real UNESCO Prize for Women in Science, among very many other things. In the interest of time, Your Excellency, we are honored, first of all, to have you speak to us. You are a highly accomplished scientist, for instance, and in the private sector. Would like to pick your thoughts on what the role of the private sector in ensuring that we have proper food systems. And also, Your Excellency, the world of Africa is currently facing unprecedented challenges that need innovative and collective actions to address. What should we be paying attention to? What should we prioritize? And finally, your own thoughts on the role of governments, development partners, and also African researchers. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow scientists. I feel very privileged to be addressing this forum today. And I would like to thank my brother, Adipala, for associating me with this very interesting forum. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture, food security, poverty alleviation, women empowerment, as well as climate change are all interconnected. They are impacting livelihoods already and will do even more in the future. As we in Africa, I can safely say that they impact women's livelihoods more. These issues are important to me, not just because I'm a woman, but because as a scientist, and I appreciate how science and technology, if properly leveraged, can help make a difference in addressing the cause and concerns of rural women and to ensure them a better and more secure life. This high-level event provides an appropriate platform to start the reflection on how to accelerate the process of implementation of the SDGs and to bring back women transformation, empowerment and equality, food security and hunger to the center stage of the international agenda as outlined in the UN Agenda 2030 and within the realm of the current pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, one has to recognize that rural women are privileged partners in helping address the scourges of poverty, malnutrition and hunger, and without their active collaboration and participation, all our efforts are bound to fail. Access to food is a basic and fundamental human right. Every person on this earth is entitled to a daily diet that is safe, affordable, and nutritious. We therefore need a vibrant, productive, and resilient food system that will help end extreme poverty, boost shared prosperity for the poorest, the hungry in most parts of the world, and more so in developing countries where the majority of the world's population live. If in the industrialized nation, agriculture is a commodity producing enterprise, in the developing countries, it is the backbone of the livelihood security system of a high proportion of the population. In developed countries, only 2 to 3% of the population is classified as farmers, and in contrast to 50 to 70% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa. Nutrition security involves physical, economic, and social access to balanced diet, with the much needed macro and micronutrients, clean and safe drinking water, sanitation, primary health care, and nutritional literacy. It is widely acknowledged that many countries, as well as regions, have made enormous progress in the recent years to fulfill the MDG commitment. But it is also true that the world continues to bear a triple burden of related and distinctly different problems, such as energy deficiencies, hunger, micronutrient deficiencies that include hidden hunger and excessive net energy intake and unhealthy diet leading to obesity. The statistics are sobering indeed. An estimated 800 million people go hungry every day, 1 in 4 in sub-Saharan Africa, 1 in 6 in Asia. And these data are set to increase over the past year alone. They do not consume the minimum dietary energy needs, and the corollary of this is that over 150 million children under 5 are stunted due to chronic malnutrition, which have lifelong consequences, preventing them achieve their full potential. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that malnutrition imposes large human, economic, fiscal, and social cost. It perpetuates poverty in affected population. But what is more serious and alarming is that among the chronically hungry, 60% are women and girls. In some communities, women and girls often eat least, last, and least due to economic and cultural barriers. And here, maybe it's timely to raise the number of questions in view of enhancing the deliberations of today's events. For example, are the present food systems addressing the triple burden of hunger, hidden hunger, and obesity? How can we harness the best contribution from rural women in matters of food security, hunger, and health? How can they be empowered and the transformative capacity enhanced to tackle such burdens? It is a fact that there are other elements that are exacerbating access to safe food in many countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. In many parts of the world, contaminated food is contributing to poor health outcomes and impacting 1 in 10 people globally. Climate change, which has a negative impact on agriculture, is continuing to worsen nutrition and health. And I'm pleased that Professor Montijo has addressed the fact that most parts of Africa, they're still rain-fed, even though the continent is home to 60% of the arable land. Urbanization, on the other hand, is leading to a dietary transition in many low and middle-income countries, while at the same time affecting opportunities and risk for many health and nutrition, for many human health and nutrition. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a strategic shift that mainstream nutritional consideration and outcome in agriculture and food security strategies is needed urgently to tackle hunger. And in this regard, technology has a crucial role to play because there is a direct correlation between the increased adoption of crop and livestock technology, aquaculture and fisheries productivity, resilience and sustainability to ensure availability of sufficient calories, especially in poorer countries. In the same breath, it has become imperative to reduce gender inequality, improve water management and sustainable use, strengthen land governance and minimize land degradation, enhance farmers' skills and knowledge, as well as boost aquaculture production practices in order to help raise productivity in poor countries and rural areas. The adoption of climate-smart technologies with lower greenhouse gas emission, not forgetting traditional practices, will help improve climate resilience as well as help tackle the ravages of climate change. In many poor countries, there is also urgency in the handling of post-harvest and storage facilities. The FAO had estimated that post-harvest handling and storage loss of cereals and maize in Africa is between 8% and 1.4 to 6% respectively. Losses in perishable goods are higher. Milk losses range between 7 to 21% in some East African countries. Hunger can be tackled through homegrown school feeding programs, where crops and livestock products produced from smallholder farmers act as living outlets for the local school and help strengthen the local economy. In order to reduce micronutrient deficiencies or hidden hunger, as is referred to, small-scale farmers must be encouraged to promote a more diverse crop farm enterprise production systems, including homestead gardens, and not forgetting the underutilized and neglected foods. A more diverse set of food results in greater dietary diversity, higher micronutrient intake, and positive impacts on the nutritional status of children in the household. Also, simple nutrition messages around specific crops can be effective if they are targeted to the farmers who grow the crops and package with seed delivery and other pertinent information about the crop. Ladies and gentlemen, it is here that the contribution of rural women and girls become even more critical for achieving food security and long-term sustainability. Women, especially rural women in many countries, form the backbone of the agricultural sector and food production systems. It behoves government in these countries to ensure that the gender balance among agricultural extension workers is properly maintained to help improve the delivery of services that meets the needs of women farmers. An increase in discretionary income opportunities, along with the promotion of labor-saving technologies for women, enable them to earn more income without compromising on breastfeeding and meal preparation time. In some African countries, biofortified crops, as well as the promotion of micronutrient-fortified fertilizers, have contributed to diversify the diet of children and young adults with vitamin A and minerals. The rich orange sweet potato, as well as the zinc-enriched cereals, are prime examples. More research and development is needed on the nutrient-rich indigenous crops, as it can help alleviate malnutrition. The availability of such products can also be made more accessible and culturally acceptable when nutrition education through school feeding program get taught in schools. School feeding program is also a powerful tool to tackle obesity. Food labels, particularly on packaged and processed foods, on the other hand, can play an important role in consumer protection by conveying safety information and nutritional content. Food safety and health can also be improved by using pesticides more optimally, designing and managing irrigation schemes that do not cause an increase in waterborne diseases like malaria, and putting in place basic post-harvest food safety standards and regulation that address risk associated with staple foods, such as aflatoxins in cereals and groundnuts, and improving hygienic conditions and practices in informal markets. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, distinguished guests, with the implementation of some of these measures, I remain convinced that the empowerment of women, especially rural women, will become a reality. The connection from food system to nutrition and health outcomes passes primarily and inevitably through women. Unfortunately, women have less access to and control over assets, inputs, services, and finance than do men. As the child bearers and child care providers, women play a critical role in the health of infants and are often responsible for producing the food, purchasing it, processing it, and preparing the meals. Thus, any effective program to improve household nutrition and health must address gender inequalities. Policies and programs need to abandon a gender-blind approach and instead expand women's role in and engagement in areas around decisions about ag production, access to and decision-making power over productive resources, control over use of income, leadership in the community, and time use. There are many tested solutions, but there is no one-size-fits-all. Countries need to tailor their combination and form of intervention to suit their own circumstances. Doing so will require leadership, a greater focus on the needs of women, more collaboration between institutions and sectors, learning and innovation, and broad partnership. The road is long, but I'm sure we can. The 2030 Agenda has already provided us with a roadmap we need to succeed. This high-level meeting opens up another chapter and marks a new era in the achievement of the SDGs for the benefit of the next generation. In conclusion, let me quote what the Dalai Lama had said, and that should guide the process of our deliberations now and in the future, and I quote, "The problems we face today, violent conflicts, destruction of nature, poverty, hunger, and so on, are human-created problems which can be resolved through human effort, understanding, and the development of a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood. We need to cultivate a universal responsibility for one another and the planet we share," unquote. And it was Mahatma Gandhi who once said, "There is enough on this planet for everyone's need, but for not everyone's greed." I would like to thank Reforum for associating me with this very important event. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. You've been very deliberate to bring out some of the human-created problems that are affecting the food systems in Africa. But you specifically spoke about the importance of empowering the rural women and ensuring that we have policy programs that need to be expanded to empower women participation in the decision-making. You're also very deliberate in bringing forward the issues that we as Africa and the continent, we need to be looking at. For instance, the hidden hunger, supporting the small-scale farmers to ensure that they, in every single process, they are fully supported. And also you posed some very important questions that I believe even the other world leaders agree with. The fact that contaminated food is one of the issues that is affecting the way we access and use our food systems, or the way people are affected in one way or the other. Climate change, once again, you brought it forward, you talked about it, and urbanization. We are seeing most African countries realizing that urbanization, while it is good, it is increasing, but it does affect negatively food systems in the world today, and it is imperative for us to improve on the way we address that, as well as imperative to improve access to water, and not just water, but quality water. And finally, among your things you brought forward, the importance of looking at climate smart technology. African countries should be looking at ensuring that they use that, and so much more. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Professor Amina Group, for joining us. We are very delighted. I believe the audience has been very privileged to hear your thoughts on some of the things that you believe should be done to see that Africa moves forward, and not just forward, but moves forward happily and even better. Now, to our speakers, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, and even to those that are watching us, a number of comments have been coming through, and I do want to open the discussion to some of the comments that have been coming through, and I want to believe that also the speakers, you've been checking them out. Just briefly, let us look at a few things. You know, a majority of the questions around the fact that there is a question. Okay, I beg your pardon on that. Empower women, especially the rural women, and get the best. They are the key players in agricultural production. Interesting. I think Her Excellency had pointed out that. More questions. I take this opportunity to thank Her Excellency Amina for being the only person in the world that I know who has left the State House as a president and continued with public services, a very unique character in this world, a natural born leader. Over to you. That is your comment for you. People appreciating your work. But right now, diving into the questions, quickly to get the questions. There are quite so many comments. I'm trying my level best to get those that I can. It is time. This is a comment. It's coming in. It's time for African governments and partner institutions to mobilize or deploy science and technology to accelerate agriculture transformation and drive rural economic growth. There is need to promote projects and programs with innovative research-based development models. Those are the comments coming through in our chats, but hopefully I can get the Q&A. I see most of the people are appreciating our speakers. My hope is that I can quickly dive into the questions. So many comments. Now, Professor Itsa, this is a question directed to you. I hope we can still have you. Is it true that most students who join higher education institutions for agriculture are those with low grades or scores? What do you think should be done to improve on this? This is a good observation. Professor Itsa, I am hoping you can still hear us and you're still with us. We would like to hear your thoughts on that. There is a question directed to Professor Inta. Is it true that most students who join higher education institutions for agriculture, those with low grades or scores, what do you think should be done to improve on this? We did see some of the speakers point out that agriculture has not, people think it's not very attractive, and this is why young people are not taking part in it. What are some of the strategies that we can put in place to see that most young people take part in agriculture? I am afraid we can't get to her.
No, I'm
Maybe
here.
I could pick out
Excuse me.
another question. Can we?
Excuse me, I'm here.
Okay, great, fantastic. There is a question here on the fact that those that engage in agricultural projects are usually those that have gotten low grades. What do you have to say that, and how can we change that narrative?
Okay, this is what the people usually say, that it is a problem of curricula, and we need to change it and to make some reform in the faculties of agriculture, so that to make it more attractive for students. But for me, that is not the reason. The reason is that agriculture is in the lower part of the government concept. They are not interested in agriculture for the long time, for almost more than 30 or 40 years. Now things are changing. Things are changing, and they are more interested in agriculture. And now there is more interest, of course, in reforming some of the agricultural schemes like Jazeera scheme. That is one reason, because the students, why you get into this faculty, when you graduate, you don't have a job, you don't have a land to invest in, you don't have any incentives that encourage you to go to the Faculty of Agriculture. That is why, that is one of the main problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. There is also a question, but I want to ask the speakers, is there someone that would like to add on to this? The fact that people still think agriculture is not as attractive, and young people do not really find it interesting to take part in it. I don't know anybody, one of the speakers who feels comfortable answering that would like to hear from you on how you think young people can work towards taking part in agricultural projects, hence contributing to proper food systems in Africa at large. Anyone willing to? Yes, I can see Honorable Agnes. Over to you. Take over, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. I will answer from the perspective of education. What we find in Malawi is that quality of the students that enter into university programs very often cannot be just attributed to a one-off event. As such, one of the issues that we're looking at is quality throughout the education system. And indeed, one of the things that we would hope to do is to start introducing sciences and so on right from early childhood development, all the way from primary school, secondary school, and improving quality. Now, in a country like my country, where our university intake is less than 1%, and our secondary education only targets or achieves to educate 16%, our net enrollment for that is 16%. You would say what I've just said is a very ambitious target, but we need to be ambitious. We need to make sure that children introduced to the whole idea of sciences, technology, innovation from a very early age, which is why one of the things that I've mentioned, when I think I did mention when I spoke, that my ministry has very recently introduced a new directorate of science, technology, and innovation. You might say, oh, what took you so long? Well, we learn every day. So my belief is that changing the focus and not just looking at one point in time, but looking at the whole system, what happens in the system. It also is one of the best ways, I believe, of making sure that we expand the participation of women, because we catch girls from a very early age. When we catch them, they're still enthusiastic and they can choose sciences as well as any other, including agricultural sciences. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Honorable. I did see Her Excellency also raise her hand. Would like to pick your thoughts on that, on how we can make agriculture more attractive to young people, and how we can ensure that they stop thinking it is those that perform poorly that do engage in agriculture. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Minister for Malawi has said something very important. How can we engage our young people in science? We need to make it very attractive so that they'll be infected with the virus of science from a very early age. But beyond this, I think there is a major homework that needs to be done when it comes to portraying agriculture in Africa. It is still being portrayed. There is too much stereotype of that woman with a hoe digging a very dry land with a baby on her back. This is not agriculture as is practiced these days. So the stereotyping has to be removed. And I'm very pleased to see a question as well from my friend Maud Kamatanesi. And she said something very important. How do we, how do we do agriculture if we don't have partnership, we don't have funding? I'm going to be very blunt here. Agriculture, and the same thing for education, and this has become a bit my slogan. If we are going to look at our youth, at our young people, right, governments across Africa, and includes mine too, and we did a good job, we need to start putting our hands in our pocket. We need to start investing in our own kids. They are our responsibility. We can't wait for donors to come and do that for us. When they give some funding, it's a catalyst. It's a seed money. But we need to start funding our own and capitalizing our own institutions. And this is something that many of us still haven't got to grips with. So let us start doing that. When we start doing this, then we will be able to set up our own priorities. And our own priorities is, again, one thing I've mentioned, is to go back to our own indigenous knowledge, our own indigenous practices. Let us learn to value that. Because the reason why China has made headway is because China has recognized its traditional practices. And in the field of medicine, they have given the same right and the same acknowledgement as allopathic medicine. What are we doing in Africa with respect to our own traditional knowledge? And the same applies for sustainable practices, sustainable agriculture, and we need to start investing because we cannot have, in a changing climate, over 60% or I think 80% of our agriculture, which is still rain-fed. It is impossible. We need to start really investing in technology as well. So this might
thank you so much, Your Excellency. Now, actually, I do want to stay with you. I think there is a question I saw that was directed to you, and I hope I can quickly get it. Maybe just to pause onto there because there are a number of questions I can see it. I do see, is it possible for food security initiatives to cut across the whole Africa? This is one of the questions that is coming through, and I want to pause Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo. Is it possible for food security initiatives to cut across the entire African continent? Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo, I hope you can hear me, and this is a question that I am directing to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sandra. Sorry, can I have that question again? Is it possible
for food security initiatives to cut across the whole Africa?
Oh, yes. Is it possible for food security initiative to cut across all of Africa? It is indeed possible because the demand for food is all across Africa. I'd like to actually, first of all, also associate myself with the sentiments expressed by Her Excellency Professor Aminu Gurib Fakim. The whole issue of food insecurity in Africa is premised on the fact that we do not have enough science to drive our agriculture. That's point number one. Now, when you look at the business case, Africa is importing somewhere around $50 billion quantum of food. That is good business. Now, but the sad part of it is that despite the demonstrated demand worth $50 billion, the way I put it is this: on the continent today, there are 3 billion plates of food to be served for 1 billion people, assuming everybody can get 3 plates a day. How much of that can we source from within the continent? Now, the whole issue of how we're going to deal with meeting this supply, I will put just 1 or 2 cases and then I'll close it there. When you look at how we are getting or who is producing this food, age of our present farmers are they're above 65 years of age. Now, because of the very wrong perceptual understanding of agriculture as a business, people associate agriculture with poverty. That is a misconception. Now, take a look at Brazil, a third world country, as it were, with a population of 200 million people and only 6% people of the population in agriculture, just 12 million. And that country is a net exporter of food. But in Africa, we are about 1 billion and we have 70% in agriculture and we are still importing. So something is just not right. What I want to say is this: as the aging farmers get out of business, there is a new crop of young entrepreneurial farmers getting into the whole business of agriculture, into agribusiness, and they are doing it right. Now, it's just too early to see the impact of these young folks, but if I cite someone like Nana Note, like this lady who is responsible for Guza in Ghana, that is making a phenomenal impact, like Nono Sekotono in South Africa. I mean, so many young under 30 farmers coming up and doing it the way things, and these will be the billionaires of the future. So what I'm saying in essence is that as we have the attrition of the aging population that are in agriculture, we have new crop of agricultural entrepreneurs that are employing science, employing technology, employing the modern means of producing agriculture. Now, these will be the next ambassadors, and the whole perception of agriculture will begin to change. Like Aki Additional says, it must be agriculture as a business, not just for survival. When that is beginning to happen, and it will happen, it's a scenario that is waiting to happen. We are beginning to see young folks like the IITA young agripreneurs dotting around the continent. Things are beginning to change, and this statistics is reversing. And I think this is then the way to go, in a way that we will have food security addressed across the continent.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for your submission. Just briefly, I want to pick the thoughts of Professor Bebe Haile Gabriel, who's the FAO Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Africa. There is a quick question here. Seasonality in agriculture is a problem, making agriculture, which is mainly rained as unproductive during drought. How do we increase irrigation and rainwater harvesting for agriculture? Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much, moderator, for that question. Well, I think the whole issue boils down to building resilience to adapt to this kind of vulnerability to changes in weather, and lack of water is just one of them. In Africa, in many parts of Africa, in particular in the Sahel, in North Africa, in Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, water stress is a problem. So dependence on rainwater is not going to be a sustainable solution. And we can't do without irrigation, for example. This is just one of the problems that needs to be fixed. But at the end of the day, it also requires a comprehensive approach. It's about resistant varieties, so the application of science, not just in water management and soil and water management, but also in terms of improving the varieties and the breeds. So it's about resilience building. While at it, there was one question, moderator, if you allow me to answer. Somebody asked about food loss, the Africa food loss in comparison with other regions. What does it look like? It was in the comment, I was looking at it. So if you allow me to respond to that as well in 1 minute. Is it okay?
Yes, please, carry on, just briefly.
Okay, yeah, I was quickly checking at the figures, and the food loss, which is estimated about 14% in Africa, is only exceeded by Northern America and Europe, and Central Asia and Southern Asia. Now, compare it with the level of production over there with what we are producing. This is the point I was trying to make. Number one, the food loss is high in Africa. The background is low production. In America, in Asia, they produce more. If the percentage of crop food loss is higher, the impact might not be, as devastating. In Africa, it is very, very bad. This is happening because what we have in Africa is a broken value chain. Professor Monty Jones emphasized on the importance of agro-processing, agribusinesses as a key entry point. This is very important. It's a broken value chain. It's not sustainable. And there is very little processing capacity. In other words, this is also a lost opportunity to add value and create jobs. For young people to create more jobs, it is in the agribusiness and agro-industries area. That is where a lot of money resides. So it's a lost opportunity by not processing agriculture products. And the perishable products such as fruits, vegetables, fish, it could be higher. It could be as high as 40%, which is really significant. And what is FAO doing in this area? We're doing a lot in collaboration with other partners, of course, under ownership of the countries, and also in collaboration with the African Union, supporting countries to address their capacities in addressing the missing middle I was talking about. So briefly, I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Professor Bebe, will now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the chief organizer of this event, Professor Adipala Ekwamu. He is the executive secretary of Reform, the organization that has made this entire event possible. We want to pick his thoughts. He is one of the 100 individuals appointed by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres to mobilize global participation in the United Nations Food Systems Summit dialogue. A very good evening. It is evening now. Let us speak the thoughts of Professor Adipala Ekwamu.
Well, specifically, I think the issue is that we need collaboration, we need partnership, and then we need to build our own internal capacity, even dealing with the issue of post-harvest losses that Professor Bebe has been talking about. We need to build that capacity. But we also need to really advance and invest in science, as has been mentioned. For example, we now need to harness some of the digital technologies to support some of the activities in agriculture, including agricultural advisory services. We need to harness renewable energy to support even local industries in several of our places. And then we need to continue to focusing actions at the smallholder farmer, because those are the majority of our population. So I think it's going to be a collective effort by different actors. Universities need to work with other partners. We need to work with researchers. We need support from people like the FAO that gives us the feedback on the broader trend so that we can intervene. So really, Madam Moderator, is really a call for collective action by all of us at all levels under the leadership of our policymakers. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us. You keep on emphasizing that we really need collaboration and that it is important for us to build capacity. And that has been re-echoed on a number of occasions from the different speakers. And I believe it is a point that has clearly been taken, and moving ahead as we carry these dialogues, it is going to be something we prioritize to see that different stakeholders and different people come together to create a holistic approach to the issues that affect food systems in Africa, and more or less to actually keep them sustainable. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's really been a pleasure, very interesting conversations here. I do want you to allow me invite our very last speaker, Professor Kumba Toure Khan, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University Doussine Salom El Hadj Ibrahim. From Senegal. She was the coordinator of the Inter-Country Quality Node on Higher Education and Scientific Research of the Association for the Development of Education in Africa. She is the first advisor in charge of partnerships. We already talked about the need to have collaborations. I think you are the other right person that we can pick from. Research is an issue that has been talked about here, and innovation at the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation of Senegal. I could go on and on, but please allow me, Professor, to just really ask. I know you have listened to the issues highlighted by our distinguished speakers today. What is your take and what is your message to our gathering this evening? Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Your Excellencies, Professor Amina, Professor Abebe, Honorable Ministry from Benin, Somalia, Malawi, Sudan, Professor Monti, Dr. Yemi, Professor Ibrahim, Professor Teresa, and Professor Adipala from Reforum. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It's a great honor to me today to be present at this high-level events and address the vote of thanks on behalf of Reforum Board, and Reforum Network. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate all our panelists and participants for holding yet another very successful dialogue. We learn a lot. My sincere appreciation goes to all panelists for your commitment to share your thought and insight into how agri-food system in Africa can be strengthened. Let me take this opportunity to thank you for articulating the most appropriate, feasible pathway for achieving this. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is gratifying to note that policy leaders and highest level of the continent are available for dialogue with universities, academia, and science community to make out how different actors cannot only perform by working in partnership for the betterment of African population, especially youth, women, and smallholder farmers. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Reforum adopted a stepwise approach to the dialogue to generate ideas for the 2021 UN Food System Summit. The rich discussion today demonstrated that it is indeed collaborative effort and all voices contributed building a block to the university policy engagement discussed for strengthening agri-food business. A shift and transformation are urgently needed in our continent where we find 675 million out of the 2 billion people suffering of food insecurity. It is very humbling to listen to African senior leaders advocate for more engagement between universities and policy and focus attention to promoting skills development and inclusively. I wanted to thank you for acknowledging that universities have a strong role, and without them, agri-food system development will be greatly compromised. University must train human resources to be able to meet the need of agricultural, rural development, and the development of knowledge and technology adapted to local development. And as universities are committed to review our processes and approach to teaching, research, and communities engagement to ensure that it directly correlates to development in context specific, fit for purpose, and meets the expectations and requirements of all constituents, students themselves, smallholder farmer, industry, and policymakers. In moving forward, after listening to all of you, it is urgent to build Africa's science, technology, and innovation capacity for strengthening food system and other development, thus responding to emergency challenges. We heard all these challenges in terms of health challenges. It could be infections, malnutrition, challenges in environmental challenges, climate change, water management, environmental degradation, and also food loss, and finally conflict. There are also as the threats, conflict, security, and political crises in our continent. We need to ensure also the continent has foresight capacity for long-term planning. We need to increase investment in research and to create functional uptake pathways, including linking with industry. We need to have strategies to increase the commitment on GDP of all our nations. We need also to develop PPP in all our nations, public-private partnership. We have to invest in digital technology, we heard of that, of all facets of our operations, including teaching and learning, agriculture, and business and policy support. We need to have agriculture that will be more attractive for youth by developing innovation expertise. We need to have knowledge sharing, technology transfer and application, development of scientific park, incubators, making agriculture as an attractive opportunities for youth oriented toward entrepreneurship and the promotion of self-employment. We must galvanize partnership for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food system. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I appeal to you in your different capacities and sphere of influence to articulate the ideas generated by the dialogue today to ensure that they are considered by the UN General Assembly and the Food System Summit in October this year. Let me use also this opportunity to congratulate the Reform Secretariat, especially Professor Adipala, the Executive Secretary, for being a true champion that has galvanized dialogues and facilitated universities' participation in the Food System Summit. And thank you for all your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You did also point out the very key issue, the need to invest in digital technology. And that is something that I believe the leaders watching us today and our viewers are thinking about, a very key, important, issue that people need to prioritize. The African continent does need to prioritize. And ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end, allow me to once again invite Professor Adipala Ekwamo, the Executive Secretary of ReForum, the chief organizer of today's event, to give some of his remarks that we missed out at the start. We do apologize for that on our part, and also to give his closing remarks. Over to you, Professor Adipala Ekwamo.
Prof, you are muted.
Prof, you are muted.
Our moderator, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, mine is simply to say thank you very much on behalf of all my colleagues in the Secretariat. Thank you very, very much on behalf of African universities for accepting to engage in this dialogue. We have listened attentively. We have picked out what we as universities need to do, but also it's quite imperative that we as universities, whatever we want to do, we must work in partnership with other people. We appreciate the insights from Her Excellency, Professor Amina. We appreciate the insight from Monty Jones. We appreciate very much your perspective of where we should go as a continent. Professor Ibrahim Dukeri, thank you very much for what the Arab Organization for Agricultural Development is doing. We are very, very grateful for that. Yemi, really thank you for those very, very insightful ideas that you have. We hope you can share the full paper with us. Honorable Ministers, it was a great, great honor to have you with us in this dialogue. We have listened to your perspective as agricultural policy leaders, as educationists, but what was so impressive, you were talking beyond your line ministries. You were the development specialist. We are very, very grateful to listen from you from Benin, Somalia, Malawi, Sudan. My friend from FAO, we are always really, really very, very honored to hear from you. And there's been a lot of demand on your presentation that we would like to be shared with other people. The two vice chancellors, thank you very much. You have listened. There's a lot of work to do, but it's about the broader education value chains. It remains capacity development, science, technology, and innovation, and not leaving anybody behind. Ladies and gentlemen, let us engage in this UN food system dialogue. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Adipala Ekwamo, for those closing remarks. I do want to add my voice to that. Thank you for organizing this event and making sure you've called different key stakeholders to engage in such a very important discussion. And as we conclude today, I really do want to extend gratitude to all the speakers that have been very intentional in helping us understand the importance of having proper food systems in Africa and the world at large. Today, the audience, thank you so much for creating the time. I could see a lot of questions, but sadly the time we didn't have, but hopefully we'll find a way of getting these questions answered too. It is safe to say that food is more than just what we eat, and also the ways in which we produce, process, and actually consume food touches every aspect of life and every single person on this planet. Now that is why dialogues like these offer a powerful opportunity for people everywhere, anywhere, to have a seat at the table of this milestone UN Summit, giving us the chance to connect, meet new partners, inspire, and of course be inspired. And ideas, solutions, partnerships, and action plans generated in the dialogues are very critical to the summit's success. That is why the summit needs your input. As always, we encourage you to join a dialogue, for instance, or convene your own. In doing so, you can help us build a better future for food systems, a future that is strong, safe, and fair for all of us. The next dialogue will be happening on the 1st of July. Thank you all for joining us once again. I have been your moderator, Sandra Twino.